All right. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Serious Angler podcast, episode number 218. As always, I am your host, Bailey Egbert, and joined with me is the captain, Mr. Andy Full. Dude, I really thought I was going to script the introduction because it's probably been our longest hiatus on this show, and probably since its inception, to be honest with you.
I won't lie, it was a pretty nice vacation. I mean, you were in Texas catching giant largemouth. I was up here slaying giant smallies, and it was actually kind of nice. I mean, I don't want to do it all the time, but it was actually kind of nice to take a little bit of a breather for a week.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of folks that aren't involved, like whether in the industry at some capacity, understand the amount of work. Even at our level, like I mean, my hat is off. I spent some time with Mark Jeffries down from Bass Talk Live down in Texas at the Classic Expo and within the media center and all that jazz. And I give an immense amount of props to guys like that, and like Drew Gregory, who's coming to come join us. I bet here he's had his own show as well. There's a lot of work that goes into putting on a platform that tries to stay consistent with the content, with times and all that jazz. See, hold on, we're getting an echo from you, Andy. It takes a little bit of work to stay consistent with a show like this. So we grind a lot. So I will admit, as much as I love the show, as much as I love tuning in to the fans, it is nice to take a little week breather and kind of get things back in order. And to be honest, I probably would have been, as much as I'm exhausted now, if we had to do shows while we were in Texas, oh my gosh, I don't think I'd probably be a ghost right now. It was tough. Yeah. I literally started driving back from Texas yesterday morning, and I got back into New York this morning at 5 a.m. And I texted Andrew and I said, I'm going to just pass away for the day. I'll talk to you later tonight.
I texted you at 4:30 in the morning because I woke up because my allergies just crushed me, and I woke up and went to the couch, and it's like, oh, I'll check in on Bailey and make sure he's alive. And I think I literally texted him and said, alive? ? And he's like, half hour from home, gonna crash. I'm like, don't crash. But without further ado, let's give the folks a little bit of a recap on your drive down to Texas so they know the debacle you went through.
Dude, I've been sorting this crap out since I got down to Texas. And then obviously I've been sorting it out today too. Like it's still holding the process. I got to take the car in 2 days from now. So I'm making my way down, making good time. And I'm in Springfield, Missouri. And I'm getting off the exit. And I
my fault. It was my fault because I told you to go to Bass Pro. So I'm taking
I get off the phone with Andrew here, and we're talking about Bass Pro. And I need to stop anyways. I'm like, yeah, I'll stop. I'll go to the Bass Pro. And I get off the exit. And there's a red light, and I go to turn right, and I'm completely stopped, not even moving. Look to my left, make sure no one's going, and as soon as I go to look to my right, bam, I just start flying forward like 10 yards in the middle of the road, and I get rear-ended, and basically all negative thoughts flooded my brain. Like I'm halfway across the country, 14, 15 hours away from home, and I'm like, this was supposed to be like an epic trip for me, and we pull around the corner and all that, and if anyone follows up with the page, like my back left rear of my car is destroyed, but I got so lucky in terms of like everything ran perfectly fine. There was no damages beyond just my car just looks like crap, but it's fine. She's got character. It's all good. We're good. But I will say one really funny thing that came out of this was I'm pulling into our hotel. We stayed at the same hotel as a lot of these pros and the guys that, the big companies that were staying and working the expo. And I'm pulling into valet my car because there's no parking, throughout that whole road with the expo going on in the convention center. And Cliff Prince pulls behind me. You see a bunch of these guys are pulling in, and I just like, they're nice trucks. There's nice vehicles, Escalades, Porsches. And then you have this banged up, beat the crap out of Nissan Altima with a car or the kayak on top that's pulling into the license plate.
So funny.
It was hilarious. My boss is waiting for me at the front entrance of the hotel, and he is just dying. He's in tears, laughing at me. It was good. So a little bit of good came from it. Obviously, both myself and the other person that that hit me is perfectly okay. No one is injured, and all is smooth so far. We just need to go take it in, and fingers crossed that we can get her fixed and back on the road. But yeah, a little bit of a hectic trip, which you guys will see once I can get time to start editing this championship video series that I put together. And yeah, it was interesting to say the least. But we're all as good, and we're going to keep grinding away. We're back on the show. We're back on the grind. And obviously, Andrew and I will get into it more at the end of the show here, but we have a tournament coming up this Saturday, our first team tournament of the year. And we're looking forward to that. But, Andrew, I think without further ado,
let's bring them
we have some other stuff to cover tonight. And we have to introduce our friends here joining us. Mr. Destin DeMarion, Bassmaster Elite Series Pro, and our good friend.
Hey guys.
And our good buddy, Mr. Drew Gregory, coming off of a top 10 at the inaugural Bass Kayak Classic, and probably one of the most prolific spokespersons of the sport of kayak fishing. But the nice thing with Drew here is Drew can cover all the bases. He can cover kayak, and he can cover the actual Bassmaster Classic. So we are very excited to have both these gentlemen join us. One, because they're both great friends of ours, but then they obviously are going to be very, very helpful in going over this Bassmaster Classic recap. And I know both of you guys were very busy during the expo, so I am appreciative of both of you guys to come join us here and talk about what went down, because it was a pretty crazy Bassmaster Classic. I don't think it's what a lot of people anticipated in multiple facets, but yeah,
No.
it was.
I think a lot of us expected that offshore game to really be a big factor, and then the weather really coming in kind of changed things and threw a lot of guys a curveball. I think if you picked your fantasy team before that changed, I think you're going to be in trouble because Andy. But all those shallow water guys really dominated that tournament. The guys that are more deep water specialists, it really wasn't necessarily in their wheelhouse. So, yes, if you did pick your fantasy team before the changing conditions, you might have been finding yourself in quite a predicament.
Well, here's what I'll go with. So, speaking about the fantasy show, obviously we have our own little segment we do with Bassmaster Fantasy, but I had chosen a lot of these shallow water guys. I had Keith Carson, I had John Cox, probably the most, dominant, most confident shallow water anglers. And going into this, seeing the conditions, I think a lot of people had a good feeling about these two. And I think I don't think either of them finished above 40th.
Mm-hmm.
It was very shocking to me that, a guy's like Hank Cherry, who, 3-4 years ago was like, I don't like fishing shallow. I don't like to flip
Hank loves fishing shallow. I've never heard of that. Hank is a jig fisherman. He's a North Carolina fisherman. He is a jig guy. That is what those guys are born and bred. They get a Zebco with a jig on it when they come out of the womb.
Destin, you're right, dude. You're right. I got a little insight for you. I don't know if you know this, Destin, but I lived in North Carolina for 10 years.
I did not.
So in Charlotte. So I know Hank and Matt Airy is probably my closest Elite Series friend and angler.
Man,
and
he's right there too.
He's a great dude. And so I've been on their Let's Talk Fish podcast with he and Thrift a few times.
Yep.
But listen, I got a little insider information here for the Serious Angler podcast. I'm going to bring it. Okay. Hey, before I say that, I know I'm not wearing a hat like you guys, and I look like I just woke up because I'm as destroyed as you are, Bailey, and everybody. And there we go. You guys join me. I'm whipped. I'm exhausted. I know I look like Chad Pipkins over here. I haven't even done anything to my hair. I'm not looking for a Douglas J. Salon sponsorship or anything, but this is just how it is.
Paul Mitchell.
Yeah, Paul Mitchell. That's right, because why would Douglas J. sponsor anybody when, they already got Pipkins. So anyway, but I just, woke up, and this is literally just how I look. We got a toddler taken care of, so life's crazy over here just like everybody, but that's what's fun about this show. We get to come back and decompress and let it all out. So back to the North Carolina Hank Cherry story. So I was filming a commercial for Lunker Text, which is, you notice Matt Airy talked about Lunker Text on stage. And, a lot of pros were there. I drove down from Northeast Ohio to go down there since I know those guys, and they invited me to be a part of it. And let's see, Thrift was there. Brian New was there. Hank was there. Lineberger was there. Matt Airy was obviously there. Fat Cat Newton. A lot of really cool characters. If you haven't seen that commercial, it's actually really, really funny. You should go watch it for longer text. But anyway, there's a lot of downtime, as you guys know, when you're filming something like that. So we're talking about the Classic. I just said to Hank, I said, what do you think, man? And this is in February. And this is what he says to me. He's going to, well, this is back when I think the Classic hadn't been postponed yet. When did it get postponed? Does anyone remember what month it was?
It was pretty close to the date. Yeah, it was pretty close to when it was supposed to.
Okay, so early February, we're filming this. And he says to me, I'm going to go to the dam. I'm going to hit that riprap, and I'm going to see if there's any of those big smallmouth there potentially that are in that lake too. Because in March, I guess maybe that's where he thought they would be. I don't know if he ever caught any smallmouth on it, but either way, he knew that's what he was going to do back in February, early. And then he said, he also told me this, because we were having a conversation. I was bringing up the point that I think, normal average Joe anglers are being fed too much about being versatile, and they got to learn all these techniques and tactics to catch bass, when really you don't need to know that many to catch bass. Obviously, you need your deep water techniques, your shallow water, your murky water, but you don't need to know there's like 150, 200 techniques these days. So I was saying people are trying to be too versatile, and the average Joe doesn't spend as much time in the water as Destin does, or Andrew, right? So they don't actually need to learn all those. They need to get good, really excellent at these few. And Hank said to me, goes, dude, about all I throw is a jig and a jerkbait and maybe some crankbaits. And I think he said crankbaits too. There was three things. Yeah, that's it. It was three things. That's it. And I said, Hank, dude, I totally agree with that, because you just need to get the bait to the water column where the fish are. You need to have a couple techniques to do it. That's it. If they're there, they're going to bite most likely, unless it's some insanely high-pressured lake, or there's a rare situation where there's vegetation that's got to float up. Your bait's got to float up, and you need a drop shot as opposed to a bait that just sits on the bottom, something like that. But that would fall into my category if you just need a few techniques that can hit each water column and area. Anyway, he pulled it off. He knew what he was doing back in February. And I just sat there watching. I was like, I can't believe he just did that.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah, I traveled with Hank last year on the Elites, so I got to see a lot of his style, which honestly is very, very different than mine. But I mean, I learned a lot from the guy, and he fishes like almost all the North Carolina guys do. I mean, he's definitely more of a jerkbait specialist and probably the best in the world at that than those guys. But a lot of those guys are really good at it. I mean, those winter trail tournaments. I actually met Hank through my travel partner who used to fish with team tournaments with him, Craig Chambers. And, those guys are fishing against Brian Thrift, Matt Air. All those guys are fishing those winter trail tournaments, and Lineberger and Hank and all them against each other all the time. And, they've got to be good at those techniques. They've got to be good at jerking. They've got to be good at square bills. They've got to be good with a jig. And that's all year at Lake Norman, honestly. I mean, the jerkbait is being more of a all-season bait, too. As you can see, in the heat of the heat of the Texas summer, the jerkbait is still playing.
Mm-hmm. And that clearly,
Yeah, I think that is one of the major takeaways from this. And there's a few. And obviously the first and foremost is congrats to Hank Cherry, because he's now the fourth guy ever to go back-to-back. And amongst the other three was Kevin Van Dam, Jordan Lee
and Clun.
Clun. Joining a prolific group, and I guess a very small group, a legendary group of guys to be able to do such. But was another year of the jerkbait, because how successful he was with it with Gunnersville last year. And then I think another takeaway, and something I've seen, I'm curious your guys' take, and this does not degrade or take away from Hank's win whatsoever. It was very impressive what he did regardless. But I think it was one that Matt Airy lost and not Hank Cherry win. What do you guys think?
I say yes and maybe no. And here's why. Can we all agree that the one fish he lost on the frog that ate it completely and swam towards him, and he didn't know it had actually eaten the frog? He said he saw a leaf floating and he still thought that was his frog. That one he should have caught, 100%, right? We all agree on that. The other ones, it's part of frog fishing. It smashed it and missed it. And Hank won by 2 pounds? I think Airy, if he calls with that fish, if it's a 4-pounder, which we all agree, whenever we say it's a 4-pounder, it's always a 3 1/4 or 3 1/2. It may not have been a 4. I don't think that fish calls 2 pounds.
Mhm.
I'm not positive it does. And that's the only one I feel like he should have for sure had, and he knows he should have had. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it is frog fishing, but I think he lost another one, including the one that he did that did lose. That was like that Bass showed the most, where it dogged him a little bit and lost it.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a really weird way to lose a frog fish. Is at that moment.
What, when it's dogging like under the boat?
Yeah.
Well, he never set the hook. He never. You think about it. It hit. It rolled up, ate it, came down, swam right at him, and he's still looking at the spot where the fish hit, and he sees a floating leaf. Because he said he took his eyes off his frog for a second, which was his first mistake, and he thinks that's his frog. So the fish is swimming towards him with the bait in his mouth, and he never caught up to it and had the tension to set a real hook. So once it felt some tension from him catching up, it just spit it out. It's a weird way to lose it, but that what happened explains it.
In reality, I think Steve Kennedy really had some really good opportunities to also win. I mean, day 2, he had that one probably 7, maybe 8 pounds that came off. And day 3, he had one probably about 5, between 4 and 5 come off. And he was just really just swinging at that point, trying to catch big fish. I think if his strategy would have changed a little bit had he had caught that big one day 2.
100%. But you might be right, Bailey. I mean, Matt did lose some other ones too, and you could definitely argue. And I know he feels like he probably did lose it because he had the bites, which is the hardest thing to get especially when other people aren't getting the bites. And Destin, 100%, dude. If Steve catches that fish, he comes in with a 5-pound lead over Hank or something probably big. I don't know, 3, 4, 5-pound lead. And fish is totally different to get the bites rather than going back out to the sticks to try to get another 8-pounder, which is what he had to do at that point. So,
and honestly, if you're getting the bites, I mean, after the tournament, as long as you didn't completely mess it up, you got to feel good about that. I mean, there's been many tournaments where I had the bites to have a really good tournament, but it just wasn't, meant to be. I've seen it on camera and be like, well, there's really nothing I could have done in that case. So I'm sure it hurts Matt, but I mean, getting those bites and Steve too, like, I'm sure they're like, you know what, I did make good decisions. It just wasn't my time. And Hank's somebody that says that when it's your time, it's your time. And obviously it was his too. It was his again.
Yeah. It was for Matt and B.A.S.S and Steve as well. Like, Steve day 2 came down to the media center and I had watched the clip of him losing that big one. And like, there's a lot of media there that know fishing, but I don't think there's a lot of media that were in that media center that like have kind of their life surrounds around bass fishing. And so for me, when I watch Steve in there, all I do is like I feel pain. Like it hurts my heart to like see him. Like I don't want to say anything because I know exactly. We've all been there. Like what's going on in his head at that moment. And Ari afterwards on day 3 when all the guys came down to get interviewed, like it was cool to see all the guys going through it and guys were happy, but you could kind of almost see in his face where he's putting on a persona of he's happy. Obviously he got second in the Bassmaster Classic. He won 50 grand, which 50 grand. No one's unhappy to win 50 grand.
Right.
But at the same point in time, you could almost kind of see like a look in his eye where he's just like in pain because he knows what opportunity he missed. But I am very confident in saying that that's not the last time we're going to see Matt Ari in contention for a Classic.
Yeah.
Or Steve Kennedy, he almost won like Conroe.
Yep.
If we bring that one back, another Texas fishery doing pretty much the exact same thing as he was doing in this one.
Well, yeah. I mean, think about it. The next Classic, I know Ari is on the bubble right now. I think he's in 40th. But if he makes it, it's on Hartwell, and he's, pretty darn close there too. And they, like you said, Destin, they're fishing Lake Norman the most and Moss Lake, which Ari grew up right on Moss.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of spotted bass, or I should say Alabama bass, if I want to be technically correct here, which I'm not gonna get into all that, but technically it's called the Alabama bass. It's not spotted bass, but the spotted bass are up north, guys, up those little dinks. But anyway.
We got them.
So anyway, Matt knows they got him there, and Hartwell, Matt knows how to catch them as well. So maybe we'll see him in contention again if he can just make it into the Classic. We'll see. But hey, I'll tell you what, he did win in a lot of ways because the world got to see what a good guy he is. And I mean, he really is. He's never looked at me as, a kayak angler. I'm not going to talk to that guy or what he's never looked at me any differently or, lack of respect or anything. Like sometimes you kind of see people roll their eyes, like, what are those guys doing? Or they just don't get, our side of the world, and that's fine. But he's always taken me in, let me stay at his house. Just super nice guy, man. I mean, him and his whole family, and the world got to see that and see what he's all about. So I feel like and he got so much airtime. I mean, huge win from Matt Airy. I know he may hurt a little bit from a couple of those fish, but huge win as well for him.
Yeah. So there's two different things I want to touch base on about this, and one of them has to do with Steve Kennedy, and one of them has to do with Hank and the airtime. And I want to hop into the airtime one really fast, because one thing I noticed, so throughout from probably 11 a.m. to when they closed live, I maybe saw, and I spent a lot of time looking at live at this point, I saw maybe Hank on live for maybe 30 minutes of the last 3 to 4 hours. I thought that was very interesting. They showed a lot of 2 to 5. They didn't have the leader, Hank, leading the Bassmaster Classic on the last day on live for very long. I thought that was kind of interesting. Maybe I'm the only one that noticed that, or maybe there's a reason that maybe I'm missing. But I thought that was kind of weird.
I didn't, but I will say I've been watching a lot of old tournaments, and I think the intrigue really is, day 2 of the tournament, in our tournaments, they're showing the cut line, and they're trying to show guys trying to make that cut, So
That's
in
true.
the same situation, 2 through 5, those guys that are trying to push for that top spot when, I don't know if Hank was still catching them that good at that point. So maybe they were like, all right, let's put it on them. And all the heat's on that, and everybody's kind of interested. Is somebody going to catch another big fish and, jump him? So I'm sure that's probably what it was.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Like in anticipation of a comeback. If Matt Airy was on a roll at that point. So there was a lot of focus on Airy those last few hours. So
yeah.
It's like a drama segment.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
He was getting more bites. Yeah, he was getting more bites, and I think there could have been some poor sell around some of Hank's spots. Plus, he moved a good bit. I don't think he only caught like 5 or 6 fish the final day, right? It wasn't. He barely caught the limit. So Matt had, at least 10 to 12 bites. He was definitely getting more. So I don't know if maybe that was it. So
yeah. They definitely like when you're catching fish. They'll jump off you when you're not.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, and the one other piece that I'd like to discuss here, and again, I want to reinforce and I am in no position to ever critique any of these gentlemen by any means, but Steve Kennedy and that giant that he lost at the end of day 2, I feel like he had multiple opportunities to get that fish in the boat. I feel like between, I spoke with a couple guys about this briefly, and this is no disrespect to Steve whatsoever. Steve is one of the most incredible fishermen I've ever watched on live, and I absolutely love any time I get to talk to him, watch, learn from him. But I feel like with what he was throwing, the tackle he had, the gear he was using at the time, 1, he could have either swung him in, or 2, I feel like with that fish at the surface for so long next to the boat, and again, like, I could be entirely wrong here, but I feel like he could have easily just sat down and lipped the fish within the 5 seconds it was just sitting at the surface with mouth wide open. What are your guys' thoughts? Am I crazy? Am I dumb? Or do you guys kind of have that same feeling?
Drew, you want to take this first?
Yeah, I'll take it, man. All right, so this is a tough one because it's like Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah.
This is hard. But here's the deal, man. So Steve, this is an 8-pound fish. First of all, you don't really typically boat flip an 8-pound fish. That's a big risk. That's a bigger risk, I think. But he brought it up, and I think that was like when it first came out of the tree, he brought it right up, and you don't expect a fish that big to just come up the surface, stay there, and just leave his mouth sitting there where you could have just grabbed it. He didn't know that. What he was doing was what you typically see, most good anglers do. He got it up, and then he was actually bringing it back to the bow. He was bringing it to the bow, and he was about to start walking to his seat so he could get down low, and he was going to swing it and bring it right back on the surface to his seat. In the process of getting it to the bow, because it was already at his seat, and it would have been, if you leave slack in that fish, if you go back this direction, that's when it could pop out. You got to keep it moving. So he wanted to keep it moving so he could run back to the seat and then bring it around and lip it. It's just, he got unlucky that it just came off before he could do it. I just think it surprised him that it laid on its side, and he could have probably got it right then had he known. But it was just an awkward spot where you don't see a lot of Elite Series guys lay down there and land a fish. They take it to the seat. You know what I mean? So, and that's the smart thing to do. So he just got unlucky, man. I think I don't think there's much.
It wasn't meant to be, is what it turns out to be.
Yeah, unfortunately not. Destin, do you have any thoughts? I mean, how'd you see it?
So this was very talked about, definitely at the Classic, like Expo and stuff. So I was staying with all the Buck and Bass guys, Buck and Bass House. We're on academic probation right now by Dean Weldon, but no. So like a lot of guys were talking about that, and everybody's like, man, he should have swung it, like you guys are saying. He should have lipped it. There, in that case, like, there's not really a right answer. Like, he could have boat flipped it and it broke the line. And then you would have said, why did he boat flip it? He could have boat flipped it and it just came off, because I've had that come off even when you think you got a hook good on something like a jig. Usually that is it's in there. You don't have to worry about boat flipping. But a big fish like that, who knows? So it's really hard to say. Everybody's got their opinion on it, and I definitely will not fault the guy for it. He was doing what he thought was best, and unfortunately, it really is chalked up to just wasn't his time.
Yeah. And like I said, I have no room to say anything. I've never had an 8-pounder on my line before, so I can't speak at all. I'm just throwing the conversation out there. But.
No, it was a talked about point in the tournament, so it's a good thing to talk about. I mean, like you said, Destin. He boat flips that. You don't know how much fray is on that line from. It was in a tree and a thick
cover,
tree. It was in cover there.
Heavy cover.
Yeah,
that's what makes me wonder is maybe when he set that hook, the reason it came off is maybe it was over a limb when he had set a hook, so maybe he didn't get a good hook into that fish. Because I mean, there was it was kind of noticeable to me. A lot of guys lost fish flipping. It seemed
I
you saw Todd Otten lose a good one too.
I really noticed that, and I don't. A lot of people were talking about that too. And are their mouths, harder this time of year? Are they softer? I don't know the answer to that either. But yeah, you usually do not lose that many fish on a jig, and there had to be the way they were eating it or something of that nature was really being a factor this week. The hot water. Sometimes the water temperature can make the mouths like harder, softer. That is something to consider.
Is that what Kennedy had that fish on? Was that a jig or is it? Was it? Yeah.
That's the only thing I could think of. Is maybe it's over a branch. That's why they couldn't get a good hook or couldn't get that good hook penetration. But
I mean, I've seen a lot of time post spawn. Their mouths are pretty beat up. I mean, sometimes that can be why you don't keep them pegged, but I don't have the answer to that.
I mean, the only thing I can think of is so many of these fish were biting in bushes, and they're not getting. You don't have a straight line to the fish necessarily. It's going over some limbs and branches. You're never going to have the same force, right? That's the only thing I can think of. Plus, they may not have it as well or as good as they could have got it because they had to smash into a bush to get it, so they didn't get it. They weren't able to swallow it whole in their when they flare their gills and that. The water comes in, they weren't able to get it the same because their mouth is smashed into bushes. Does that make sense? That's the only thing I can think of. The
fluorocarbon factor there too in the bush. So obviously you want to flip with fluorocarbon, but braid is no stretch. So you're probably going to get a better hook, but it's going to bury into the wood. So it's kind of a catch-22 in that regard. I mean, I know there's a few northern guys, especially like a Seth, that likes to do like the braid to fluoro flipping thing. I don't know if guys are having better success with that, but that is something that's a good point, Drew.
Yeah, I would have been using straight braid. That's just my style, man. I just tear them out of all that stuff and best I can, like you said. But it can dig. But if they're smaller branches like that, it's not gonna. They don't have strength. They're gonna flex, so it's not gonna dig in and you know what I mean. You're just gonna be able to pull them right out with braid. But I don't know, man. I mean, Hank went to lighter line and he got some more bites when he was missing them or losing them. I don't know if that had anything to do with it or just.
Yeah, he's still 15, I think. It was 15.
Yeah, he dropped. Yeah, he dropped down for hoping to get more bites because he was concerned about getting 5. But I will. I'll touch on a point and see what you think, Destin, and anybody else wants to chime in real quick too. Here's what I think went down at this Classic with flooded. When you have a flooded situation, okay. And this happens in rivers because rivers, as a lot of you guys that follow me know, I'm river bassing guy, hooked on wild waters. That's what I do. So when rivers, when the fish spawn in the shoals, they go in the shallow areas, the shoals. those areas are dry or very low, and they can't sustain populations of fish from, June to October before some winter rains come in, or November even. So the forage in those areas, shallow parts of the river, have time to rebuild, right, and regrow. And so then when the spring comes, the water fills up, winter, spring, and a lot of the fish I'm talking about, smallmouth and shoal bass, especially down in Georgia, spawn in those areas. And there's enough water in there to sustain a giant population of fish. They go in there and they feed on this forage that has had time to build and grow, So when it floods in a lake, and JK from Bass, you and I were talking about this, when it floods, the fish actually will move up in there, the bait fish and all the bluegill, brim, everything else. And now they're feeding on a whole new element of forage, whether it's insects, everything else. And plus the bait fish continue to move as shallow as they can go and find all that cover. They now move all the way up in there. So it took that offshore game kind of, not that there weren't fish offshore, because there were some, but all the bass in the lake know this is a rare opportunity for me to go and feed and get some stuff that normally is not accessible. And then they're going to feed on it all. And then eventually that water is going to come back down, and then they're back to their normal game plan. I kind of think that's what happened, because JK was basically telling me, Justin Kimmel was saying, there's a lake, I'm not going to say the lake in the southeast, that he fishes when it's at full pool. He can't get to the largemouth that are way back in there, and they're big in a bass boat. But he knows the lake has big largemouth. It's known for more spotted bass or Alabama bass, but he knows it's got big ones, because when it comes down below full pool, he's all of a sudden catching these largemouth. And he's like, well, where do they go? He's like, they go back up where I can't get them at full pool, take that to another extreme. And now the fish that were offshore, or even where the fish normally are, on the bank probably, and the fish that are shallow are actually up in the further up. I just think that's what happened, and it crushed anybody's offshore hopes, really. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting that we didn't even see a single person really have any success offshore. How it was very dominated, up in the bushes, up shallow. It was. I was very surprised, because, at least in my mind, I don't feel like a lot of fish are that affected by flooding water. I feel like if they're already out, that they don't get as. I guess they don't feel the change if they're out that far. I mean, Destin, Andrew, Drew, feel free to correct me on that. But I feel like when they're already post-spawn, they're already pulled off, which is a whole nother topic that we're going to go into here. When they're already pulled off, I feel like that it's hard for them to, when they feel that flood, to make a push all the way back up shallow. I don't know. It's an interesting concept for me to kind of get over, to not have or not see anyone have any sort of offshore bite going beyond, maybe Hank Cherry at the dam throwing a jerkbait. That was it. I don't know.
I don't think they were off in mass. Does anyone else think they were off? I mean, people were catching fish pre-spawn and spawning fish.
That was another topic I want to get into after this, is watching those fish get taken to the stage. Almost all of them were beaten the heck up. They were all bloody, mangled. It looked like literally they just came off the bed. It was very interesting. It was really. I was sitting next to Mark Sexton from Berkeley, who's a bass behavioral, biologist, and dives into that. And we're like, dude, these fish look like they just spawned. Like, they look horrible. They look like they just went 10 rounds with a giant northern muskie. Like, they look like they got beaten the crap out of. It looks like they just came off.
Let's remember how cold it was down in Texas this winter, early spring. So I was talking to some guys from around there, and they said they'd seen bass on beds as early as the week before, the tournament. Not necessarily that lake, but around that area. So how far behind everything is in that region. So you've still got a lot of fish that just kind of wanted to be shallow too, I'm sure. But from my understanding, like, when that water comes up, no matter what time of year, they're coming with it. In that lake, it's just a lake where that water comes up. I mean, in that region, Lake Texoma, not too far. Those areas, when that water comes up, those fish flood those bushes. They flood those trees. And that's generally how the tournaments are won. I mean, you saw Lake Texoma. That's how Hackney won the tournament. It's a smallmouth dominated lake, and he was in the bushes. I mean, there is a lot of big largemouth in Texoma too, but a similar situation there. Obviously, it's summertime, but I mean, I think a lot of those fish kind of live in mid-depth in the summer there, from what I understand. And when that water does come up, I don't know if those brush piles and things that they like just get a little bit too deep. I don't know if it's an oxygen thing potentially too. And they just kind of all the bait too, pulls from that deeper stuff and comes in shallower. Because obviously you had shad in those bushes. You had a lot of shad in that area. And I mean, generally you've got a lot of shad population pushing out by that time of year if it was a normal year, but it's not, it was not a normal year.
Yeah. It's a really interesting concept to brainstorm, thinking, how do those bass that are out deep feel that water rising? It's a really kind of interesting
pressure deal, I bet. I bet you the pressure changes and it pushes them, like they're just not in that comfort zone with that hot water. So they're like, okay, I got to get out of this pressure that I'm feeling. And they just start cruising shallow. And obviously, if there's bait fish around them that were there and they leave, they're just going to follow the bait. So if that bait is going shallow, they're just going to follow them right in because they have to eat. They're not going to sit out there and do nothing.
Yeah, for sure. They also have those little, I don't know if you guys know this. I don't want to get into deep fishing biology here, but the bass have miniature little microscopic hairs on their scales, and they will sense where that water's moving and where it's going. And they can, every direction, up, down, left, right. They can sense it. So I just feel like you guys said, they, and all the elite guys, most all of them figured it out. So that tells us something. Nobody was doing something offshore. So it tells us they all kind of figured it out. And the new nutrients, just all those new fresh nutrients, it just drives all the bait shallow, everything shallow. And the bass they all know they're eventually going to go back out deep, and they've always got that forage there. But they know this is a rare situation to go have a buffet in a different way and some new nutrients, new bait, and they just
high oxygen.
Exactly. Yes. Fresh. I don't think they were. The other thing is because like Zaldane was talking on BTL, and I think he said he had 2 fish on bed during pre-fishing, and he was like, "You guys just stay there," but they didn't. I think it was Zaldane who said that. But anyway, they obviously, that tells me that if there were some even on bed, the ones who already spawned, in my theory, I don't think they just go running out to 30 foot. No, they're going to work their way out in stages the same way they work their way in. So therefore, if they're in 7 or 10 and all of a sudden this happens, they don't go out to 20. They're like, oh, wait, I can take advantage of these new nutrients, new bait fish and everything else. It's up flooded and shallow, plus the murky water, which in my opinion, like smallmouth are different, but largemouth, they want to feed in a stained water situation where they can really ambush and hide so much easier and better. So they wanted to go there. And then obviously they did, and the elite guys figured it out. And then it became a game of who can do it the best and who can execute. And Hank obviously did.
Yeah. Andrew, you speak on pressure and talking about pressure systems. Like how big of a change do you guys think would have, whether in the amount of limits throughout the tournament and also a shakeup in the leaderboard, if those storms didn't roll through on day 2 during the morning, that very critical time period for a lot of guys?
Yeah, it would have been a lot better fishing for sure. I mean, you saw how a lot of guys struggled much more day 2. I mean, a few guys kind of adjusted and figured some things out, but that completely changed the game. I mean, that was a pressure change, like Andy was talking about, in a not good way.
Yeah, because it got on the 3rd day, it was extremely high pressure, like clear skies, right? If I remember correctly. So, yeah. It
hurt Kennedy the most, I think. I think it really did.
Well, his moving bait, his swim jig bite, it was gone.
Gone. It really did. And that's actually here's what's cool. Hank did not catch most of his fish on the dam. He caught, in that second day, he caught a couple.
Mostly.
Right. So, but the thing, you're right. The thing that's crazy is that second day was the hardest day to get a limit, the hardest day to pull anything off. And because he had that 1-2 punch of the dam, that's what won him the classic. Being able to get a limit that day and catch those few key fish on that stunner jerkbait, the new one from Berkeley, he helped design. Dude, that right there to me, forget day 3, forget Bad Area, forget everything else. He won the classic right there because not many people were able to pull off 5 fish on day 2 or, because of that delay. And that's where it was won.
It was something interesting I noticed too. So my eyes, each morning, because I was working at the classic, I had to be at launch each morning. So obviously I didn't have my eyes glued on live. When I got to the expo, I was watching live, but I had my eyes glued to Bass Track. Within 30 minutes of those guys launching, that's when Chad Pipkins caught Bass Track had it at a 9, but it was a little over 8 pounds. So it was almost the big bass of the tournament. And I think there was 2 over 7 and a 6. There wasn't a lot of fish caught, but the fish that were caught were bigs. Do you guys think there's any correlation with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really hadn't taken effect big time yet. And then shortly thereafter, you saw the fishing really slow down. So they caught the tail end where it was still kind of good, and then it really slowed down for them.
Yeah.
It was super, super interesting. But so funny story, actually, with these storms. The hotel in the expo where we're staying at is about an hour drive to the launch site. And my job each morning, I do PR for a company called Gunpowder, and we were working with the Weather Channel. Like the Weather Channel actually showed up, did a live broadcast every morning from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. And I checked the radar every morning just to kind of see what was going on. Radar was clear. We were fine. We show up to the launch that morning, and we're getting all set up and everything. And one of my coworkers, Jacob, he looks at me, and he goes, "Did you see that?" And I wasn't paying attention. I had my eyes on my phone. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Look across the lake." And I look across the lake, and it's like maybe 2 minutes later, you see lightning. And I'm like, "Huh, that's interesting." I didn't really think anything of it because, like Drew, as you know, we went through some crazy storms for practice for the Bass Kayak Classic, and they weren't even on the radar, the ones that we went through.
Yep.
So I didn't think anything. I looked at the radar, didn't see anything there, and next thing we know, this lightning starts getting more rapid. There's more strikes. We started hearing a little bit of thunder. It's getting closer, and I'm like, "That's interesting." So I obviously we're with the Weather Channel, so I asked them, and I'm like, "Do you guys see anything on the radar? Because I don't see anything. Like I'm on their website and everything. I don't see anything." And like I'm talking to their anchor, and he looks on his radar, and he goes, "Oh no!" And I'm like, "Oh God!" Like if he says that, like we're screwed. And literally, he goes, "There's one thunderstorm in the entire United States right now, and it is going to go over Ray Roberts while these guys are launching." And when I tell you, like, it was night and day with this thunderstorm, like, we had a little bit of nice breeze going one direction, and it started raining a little bit, so we packed it up and put it in the truck. And it went from stopped to, like, flying the other direction. Like, it was crazy. Like, you couldn't see 30 yards in front of you because the rain was so hard. It was a wild storm. But, like, and then as soon as it went from craziness to clear skies, beautiful sunrise within, like, 10 seconds. And I was like, what is Texas? Like, what is this?
Yeah, yeah, we definitely experienced that
in Texas.
Everything's bigger.
There you go. Chalk it up to that.
Yeah.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that on the kayak recap for sure.
Oh yeah, that was wild. But another topic I'd like to go down with this is home field advantage, and I think there was two sides of it that we saw. Zaldane on the opposite, the negative side, which, by the way, he has a really good episode with Bass Talk Live talking about why he thinks he didn't, perform what many expected him to, being at his home lake. But at the same point in time, I forget his first name, but his last name was Bird. Had a great
Cody. Yeah, Cody.
Had a great tribute to Mark Pack on stage for his walk-up song. And then Jones as well. I believe Jones is a local.
Chris Jones.
He was from Oklahoma.
Oh,
okay, so relatively
He's an
close.
Arkansas River guy.
mhm.
Okay. Those guys did very well, obviously. Zaldane, unfortunately, did not. Do you guys think that played a factor at all? A home field advantage for the Texans that were in this tournament and also in the top 10 or top 15?
I mean, slightly. But I think it also enabled a lot of guys that might have had some like secret offshore juice there to really not maximize that advantage. And I think a lot of guys just found some good stretches, a bank to flip, and they maximized it. I think a lot of local guys get scared in tournaments when it's not like playing to their advantage and where they don't have some secret spot that nobody can ever know. If you only live there for 45 years and fish there this time of year for 45 years or whatever, that kind of was taken out of the equation to some extent. And I think they did not have a huge advantage. I think Chris Jones he's a shallow water guy. He's an Arkansas River guy. That was his advantage. So it played to his strength. I think Cody Bird, from what I understand, is a square bill expert. Didn't really play. I'm sure if it did, he would have had an even bigger advantage in that. But somebody that you did see that come out of nowhere was Justin Kerr.
West Coast.
Well, yes, and now he lives in Oklahoma. But so at the Buck and Bass house, we had the treat of having Bobby Barrick stay with us the one night, and he was talking about actually before day 2 about the pressure and when the fishing would be good and when it wouldn't. And he actually predicted, he said, okay, storm's rolling in, it's going to get tough, yada, yada. And he said, Justin Kerr is going to do good day 2. He guaranteed it. He told us that. And based on, okay, at this time of the day, it's going to be good. At this time of the day, you better be flipping and slowing down. At this time of the day. And he had it so figured out and mapped out. And he said Justin Kerr understands that, and he's going to catch him. And he did. You saw him catch him on day 2. And he made those right adjustments based on the pressure and the cloud cover and everything going on during the day. And, I mean, that's what you saw from that advantage wise. It wasn't necessarily home field advantage, but understanding those variables.
I'm really glad that you took that angle, because one of the things I wanted to emphasize was that home field advantage played no factor in this tournament, because you hear Zaldain talk about it. Is like he spent so much time before cutoff graphing, looking at his screens for that tournament, to 8 days before realizing it's going to play absolutely no part. It was a waste of time. He's going to have to go back to square one. That's what I thought was super interesting about the tournament. It was a very level playing field. And we actually have a good question here, which I'll get to in a second. But on the flip side, I know he didn't do as well as he wanted to and what people expected, but Chris Zaldain did have the coolest catch of the weekend, in my personal opinion. Yeah, I got to witness it in person because he was literally like 200 yards out of where they launched. Because the launch docks were actually submerged, and I literally watched him. He had like 40 boats around him, and we were like about to wrap up and leave. And you can see him, like we were probably a few hundred yards away. You can see him just hucking that giant mag draft and glide bait, and he just puts it down completely. Goes in his rod locker. I'm like, oh, he's already done with the swim bait. Picks up the big old flutter spoon. Within one flip, just like flipping a dock piling with a big flutter spoon, and jacks that, like, what was it, 714?
Yeah, something like that.
The coolest thing ever. Like, I was a little kid in the candy shop watching him do that, and boat flips it. And I'm like, it was day 1 too. So
that was a good start to the day. Yes,
I was like, this is gonna get around.
I was like, all right, now we're going.
I think it gave a lot of people a sense of false hope for how the weekend was going to go.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Dude, I love fishing like that, like Zaldain, but at the same time, I love fishing like that once I have 5, and he's willing to do it. He's willing to do it all the time. But what's funny is, and I'm in his boat here. I'm not big by any means. I'm probably the same height as Zaldain. We're not big dudes, so I'm not calling him out, but I'm saying, does anyone else think that when Zaldain throws that big stuff, he looks like my 3-year-old toddler when he grabs, like, yeah, he'll grab like my full-size golf clubs or something, like my golf clubs or full-size fishing rod, and he's just out there. I'm like, that's what he looks like to me. It's like
an oversized axe, like chopping a tree.
What's funny? That's a great point. So what's funny at the Classic? A lot of guys are like, I never realized how small so many of these guys are. Like on TV, they look like way bigger.
Yeah.
Hey,
they're like, I don't know. It's just the guys that were too small to play sports, like in high school and stuff. But like, that's what some people were saying. But like, obviously, these guys are the best. Like, they're super competitors and stuff. And size means absolutely nothing in fishing. Nothing.
No.
You could be 4 feet tall, or you could be 8 feet tall. Honestly, I think 8 feet tall might be a disadvantage.
Yeah.
If you were super tall.
Kayak fishing, it actually really does work in your play if you are smaller.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, it helps me out in a lot of situations, being very light on the kayak and drafting shallower, and and being able to just have if you're taller, generally you're not as what's the graceful word to say this to all the tall guys listening? You're not as I don't know, coordinate. You have a higher center of gravity, and so it's tougher to stand in a kayak, which is not easy to stand in.
For sure.
But that's why they make kayaks so big these days. And then if you get the bigger kayaks, you can stand in it because you're bigger. Now you can't you're at the disadvantage where you can't get as skinny as I can get in my little teeny kayak sometimes. So it actually is an advantage on our side to be a little lighter, a little smaller.
I would love to watch Jason Williamson with like a 6'6" drop shot rod and just see what it looks.
Yeah, he's a big dude. The tower of power. He's a tall guy. He's probably like 6'5", 6'6".
He's
big.
Looks
like he's ice fishing out there.
It's one of the that's one of the most fitting nicknames on the Elite Series, right there.
Yes.
Power. Yes. And everybody's favorite is not getting a big co-angler because it slows your boat down. So there's a disadvantage there too if you're really big.
Yeah.
So being smaller, honestly, I mean, the stamina thing, and it's something I've talked about a lot, is I don't care if people think it's funny, bass guys talking about being in shape. You need to be in shape. Seriously, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage if you're not in somewhat shape. Now, you don't got to be like a marathon runner or anything by any means, but you got to have stamina. There's a lot of guys that can't even stand 8 hours on a boat. We're out there practicing for 14 hours in a day. You're just gonna miss out on a lot of opportunities.
Yeah,
that's for sure. So going back, I know I said there was a fan question here that was going to be a spinoff and a great point for us to talk about. And also YouTube Kaz down here mentioned it kind of in stride with this question as well. So the Arizona guys who understand barometer and condition changes. Aaron Schimmel says, did it surprise you guys that the North Carolina guys did so well? I think it's very similar. I think it's a very similar takeaway from that. Because they
can flip a jig up at Champlain the whole way down to Florida. Like, it doesn't matter. They're going to do their stuff. That's what they're good at, and they can catch them out.
Yeah, you should have seen
Alabama guys.
A lot of versatility, a lot of adjustments that get thrown their way on a regular basis, and it's something that people can, from a demographic, like shouldn't say demographic, from a geographical standpoint, people that are adjusting constantly. Whereas maybe us New Yorkers, we probably don't need to adjust that much.
No.
We don't see as crazy as conditions as that
up here.
Yeah. When we have crazy conditions like that, you can still catch 5. They're not going to be big 5, but you can still catch 5. But
for the most part,
I remember a tournament we had at Erie once, and it was like hard east winds, like the whole tournament. Big waves. They bit like crazy. It didn't even matter. And it is true.
Least.
East, they bite the least. That's almost the fact everywhere. And they still bite.
Right.
Dumb. You just had to know how to position the boat on them.
You need to know, yes. You need to know where they are, but they're usually not that hard to catch.
So Kyle Schmidt brings up a good point with low bass population, like talking about getting bites for the full weekend. So getting essentially 15 keeper bites. Was it kind of shocking to a lot of you guys that there was only, I think there's 4 full limits throughout for the 3 days?
No.
Yeah, that's shocking to me though. I didn't see that coming.
A lot of guys with 3 or 4 fish.
Yeah.
Is that just a Texas summer norm, or like, I don't know. I found it very shocking to me.
So when I look back to 2016 at the Toyota Texas Bass Classic they had there, it was virtually the same thing, and it was more stable conditions during those 3 days of that tournament. Was a little earlier in the year. When the first day it was post-frontal, we could call it, and then you had that big thunderstorm the next day, and then high sunny pressure. The third day, the rapidly changing conditions, like the first day, it was feast or famine. If you didn't catch them in the first 3 hours, it got really tough. This was the only day I unfortunately got to watch a little, but they seemed to whack them Thursday, or was it Friday the tournament started? Whatever day the tournament started, Friday. They whacked them first thing in the morning. And then it's like tapered off during the day, and then Saturday they missed that shad spawn bite, and it was tough all day. And then Sunday, there was only 3 limits, I think, weighed in, or 4 limits on Sunday. With a lake that has low population but a lot of big ones in it, that's something you can expect. Just because when you have 54 competitors in the first day, I think most boats actually had a limit, or a large majority of that field, they've already beat up on a ton of fish for how small of a fishery it is, with a low population of smaller size.
Yeah, I think it was, when I looked, it was around 9 or 10 a.m. on Sunday. Patrick Walters was in 10th with like 7 fish.
Yeah.
It was crazy to see. You look at Chad Pipkins, who was inside the top 15. I think he had, in day 2, I think he had 6 or 7 fish, but he had an 8-pounder, and like that went a long way in something like this. Not for contention to win, but placing.
Yeah. I mean, I was surprised. Man. The guys were saying they were getting a lot of bites in practice, 20. And I guess part of it is that delay on the second day, which is why a lot of them didn't get it. Plus, it's not a full field, so I figure that's going to leave some fish there. I mean, and it was still like, in my mind, it was the beginning of summer, but it's still almost a spring time classic, given the high water. The like you said, Destin, earlier, the winter was pretty brutal, and we still had fish kind of spawning even, or just immediate post spawn. So I felt like that's a time of the year where the feed bags are on a little bit more, and I thought that more guys would catch limits. I was surprised, but it happened to everybody, so they didn't do anything wrong. It just it was the fishery just didn't flip the switch. I think it all had to do with that storm and everything after that. Just something happened, but I was a little bit surprised.
I think if the water didn't come up, it would have been better, personally, because there was so much water there from when I did have a chance to tune in. There was a lot of water that the guys couldn't even get to. And there could be tons of fish that was back in that backwater that they never had access to, and they just couldn't cast far enough to get into because there was just trees everywhere. There's so much cover that it's impossible to cover all that water when it's flooded.
Bailey,
it was a small lake.
Yeah. How would you get back in that stuff, Bailey? Come on, dude. I'm setting you up, man. I'm setting you up to say kayak, man.
I know. We're gonna get into kayak fishing here in a second.
That's where you can catch those fish when they get up in there. It's hard to get in a bass boat,
Yeah, it's, dude, and even there were certain situations at Possum Kingdom, which we're gonna get into in a second here. We're gonna obviously move over into the Bass Kayak Classic, which an inaugural event. So we're really excited to talk about that. But like, there was a couple times in Possum Kingdom where I try to get way back into stuff where I see ponds past like 100 yards of just straight reeds. Dude, it is, Drew, I give you a lot of credit. It is so hard to get in back some of this stuff. It takes a lot of just manpower, but something kind of funny. So I got the opportunity to each day sit back where the guys would stage before they would come onto and drive around and weigh in and all that jazz. So I got an opportunity to talk to a lot of the guys. And one really striking difference that I saw, and it just made me laugh, and no one's going to be surprised by this observation, but like everyone's coming in, they got the really nice boats. And some guys have little dings here and there on their boat and their wrap and whatnot. But then John Cox rolls up, and it looks like he just went through like a hurricane. His boat is just scratches all over the place. I just started laughing. Like everything they say about the guy trying to get in the crap piece of the crap is all true. Because like he puts that thing through the ringer. Like you could see it on his wrap and see how beat up it is. It's
rivets are popping out of the side and out of the hull.
He throws up and there's scratches all over the hull of his boat.
Whether he's fishing a derb every week, dude. He's like in
that's
4 days.
Yeah.
But I was actually at the Bass Tank earlier that week on my way down to Oklahoma, and I actually asked him that about. Because we were putting stickers on some of my kayaks, my Crescent kayaks, right? And I said, look, I don't like to put any stickers on the outside because they're just going to get peeled off and ripped off anyway. I don't really do wraps and all that. I put them on the inside. That way my GoPro and stuff gets them. But anyway, they said, those guys in bass boats, they said, if you look up close, there's more scratches on those wraps than you realize. Because I told them, I said, how do those bass boats always look so amazing? Does anyone ever really get up in there? They said, no, they're scratched more than you think. So it's true.
Unfortunately, yes.
It's kind of funny. Every time I see Destin, I tell him I think his boat is dirtier than the last time.
Hey, when I came home from 2 months, I washed it really, really good.
Yeah.
Yes. A place like Lake Fork, and this is what I told my marshals. I'd never been to East Texas Lake. I never fished it before our tournament at Lake Fork last year. And I told my marshals, like, who would ever buy a boat from somebody in East Texas? All your lakes are just like minefields.
Yeah. Destin, when we pre-practice on Fork, I mean, how many times did I almost fall in the lake when we hit a stump and I go like topple over it? Yeah.
You're like a pinball, like over top on the side. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, a lot of dirt roads too. A lot of dirt roads out in East Texas.
A lot of dirt roads.
So, hey, Bailey, did you want to touch on the time of year this classic was, and what are your thoughts on if it should actually be this time of year? I loved it because I thought, kids are out of school, the attendance of the expo was up, and it's still, especially if you move the classic north a little bit more. Let's say you go somewhere like somewhere that's even further north, but wherever you pick the lake.
Buffalo.
Lake Erie, Buffalo in June would be awesome.
Amazing.
Bring it on.
See?
Yeah.
Kids are out of school and you're still in like a spawn bite, like this awesome bite, like this is about, you could still go further south, but you can see, there's good fishing this time of year pretty much everywhere. So why not have it this time of year? Kids are out of school. I loved it, man. And, I guess for the fans of the expo, it was a little hot, but obviously they can get that figured out beforehand because that was never supposed to be the case. It was supposed to be in March. So they could get that figured out beforehand. But if you did it up further north, let's say somewhere, I don't know, just pick a cool spot, then it wouldn't be nearly this hot anyway. You probably wouldn't have that issue at the expo at all. It'd be just perfect weather, perfect fish bite. I liked it personally, but what are y'all's thoughts?
I agree with you, and I honestly wish they'd at least flip-flop it. So, like, it's always in March, which is great, and I understand, like, that's kind of how you kick off the season, but, like, when the Classic was in Pittsburgh, obviously the fishing wasn't great. That was the biggest turnout they'd ever had.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of fishing fans around here, and a lot in the areas like the tri-state area, there's tons of fishing people. And, if it was in Erie, Buffalo, if it was in Detroit, if it was in Pittsburgh, I don't know if we'd want to do that. But honestly, the fishing in Pittsburgh is not as bad as it was then. But there's tons of places you can have it up here and really get a really good turnout. That's what the main thing is getting a good turnout. Obviously putting on a good show, but you're going to have way more fish catches up north this time of year than you're going to have down there. It's going to be way more entertaining TV. Have it up here. And also, you're going to give some northern guys a little bit more of a better chance. I'm not saying we don't have a chance down south, because we do. But a little bit better chance, to do it.
Yeah, I have two sides to it. And, like, I understand doing it in March because, generally in the South, there's some big weights. Those fish are in pre-spawn, and people like to watch that. But on the flip side, like, from a business standpoint, I think doing it in the summer, like, one thing that Mark Jeffries from Bass Talk Live made a great point of is, like, kids are out of school. Granted, just from COVID too, but, like, kids are out of school. There was total sidebar here. It made me really happy watching a bunch of 10 to 12-year-olds run up to Hank Parker and knew who he was. That was awesome. But watching the amount of younger generation that was, and I say that I'm 23, but younger generation that was at the expo, walking around, meeting the pros, talking to guys, actually making some really good points and questions to these guys, that was really cool to see. So I'm in favor of that Summer Classic. But also, like, I understand that with a Summer Classic and, talking about the topic of going north, is you need to have a venue, obviously, for the lake, but you also need a venue within reachable distance that can withstand a massive crowd of like that. Where, maybe a Lake Erie in Buffalo would be amazing because you have Buffalo there, but then you also have the problem of Lake Erie, Buffalo weather. Champlain is very difficult because you have this, amazing lake, but where are you going to have the expo? You don't have anything within reach there where you take, like, maybe a Cayuga, and you have Syracuse within 45 minutes that you could hold it at the State Fairgrounds.
Or the Rochester
That would be a really
Convention
good one.
Center.
That would.
I think if you had a Summer Classic, it opens up far more bodies of water. The first one that comes to my mind would be like Lake Minnetonka in the Tri-City area in Minnesota. That would be a sweet classic because you could have it at the Twins Field. You could have it at the Minnesota football stadium. There's all kinds of convention centers. Like,
you could even have it at Mille Lacs and commute. There's a lot of classics. Even Gunnersville, they're driving an hour and 45 minutes back to Birmingham. So there's no reason you couldn't have it in Mille Lacs and have it in, Minneapolis area.
Yeah.
And it's not a full field either. It's 54 boats. You can put 54 boats on a lot of smaller lakes, and they'll withstand 3 to 4. They'll withstand 3 days in the north.
You can do so many fish.
The fish care factor in this tournament, I noticed a lot of guys are only bringing 1, maybe 2 fish, so they weighed them beforehand. Mm-hmm. So, that's also a factor if you're driving 2 hours, so you don't have to worry about that. If they're already weighed, you already know what they got. They bring one back just to, hold up or whatever too. So you could do that in these smallmouth tournaments. And honestly, Bailey, that's a good point. But honestly, like late June, early July, Erie, some of the most stable weather we have all season. So honestly, I could see that being a good place to have one. And I don't think they ever have had one at Erie. They haven't honestly had an elite tournament there since I was a little kid.
I think the issue there too is money. Like these cities have to fork out all the money to bring it.
It is.
And let's be real, a lot of those southern places will fork it out because they're like, well, we get this tourism once a year in the middle of the beginning of our tornado season. All these people come. If something dramatic were to happen, we have an influx of money to help us recoup the cost for something that could be tragically happening on the other side of our state. So that could be also like an outside factor that they have, a natural disaster type deal.
Yeah, the money's big.
Yeah, I think it could make, take weather out of the equation, right? I think Buffalo would be an absolutely amazing place to hold a classic because look at all the other sport teams that have events in Buffalo and how loyal and absolutely insane out of their minds that the fans get. I think if they heard that there's this bass fishing classic with this big stage and they see all this different stuff going on, I feel like people will be all over that. I mean, there's a giant hotbed for bass fishing up here that I don't think many underappreciated credit to. Very underappreciated. But like I feel like you could say the same thing for like a Michigan. You take like a St. Clair, go to Detroit. Like I feel like it's very similar.
But I think you would have a really good turnout almost to either one because in Buffalo, you're right by Pennsylvania. You're not that far. You're not far from Northeast Ohio. You're not that far from Michigan, truly. So you would bring all of those people as well as, New England, that whole area in there. Maryland isn't super far. DC people, all those people, plus all the Southern people would, they're coming to Classic no matter where it is. So, you're going to get a bunch of new people interested in the sport that, don't necessarily want to travel 20 hours away to come to a Classic, all the time. I think it's a great opportunity, and I think we haven't really seen it. And like I said, Pittsburgh was the biggest Classic turnout they ever had. So obviously that should be a very good pitching jumping off point when you're selling this to a city, because look at how much revenue that brought in for your city, how many people that brought in, how much money that brought in.
Yeah. And it's what, and Drew, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's maybe what at max, like say North Carolina, 10-hour drive to New York?
Charlotte's 8.
To what part? Yeah, it's not far.
Asheville's 12 and a quarter.
Yeah, it's not that bad. I mean, Pittsburgh, Chicago, those northern cities that have held classics. I mean, you got to look at cities that are big. Greenville is big enough that if I was actually looking for a classic venue, I would start by looking at the cities, the size of the cities first, not looking at the lakes. Because you could go to Lake Cumberland, but where are you going to go? Where are you going to bring the fish? There's nowhere. So middle of nowhere, right? So you actually need to look at if I'm looking at a map right here. You've seen Tulsa before, but Little Rock could do something. Nashville could do something. There's so many lakes around Nashville. You've got the James River in Richmond. You got
like that too.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Roanoke, and Roanoke has Smith Mountain Lake right there. So so you could move, and then further north, you guys know all those lakes. We haven't even mentioned Champlain. But I don't know if that's would ever work.
It's not really about around a big place.
You'd have to launch from Ty and go to probably Albany for a weigh-in, and I don't know how far Albany is from Ty.
Okay, you could. What about Burlington's not big enough, is it?
No,
it could be
good size, but no, I don't
they wouldn't have the money. But I mean, you got to look at the city's sizes, I think, first, and then work backwards from there. But I think it'd be cool to alternate because like you said, we're saying, Destin, it's like it stinks that it's always in the South in March. It's the same techniques. But if you moved it from north and south, but kept it in early, like mid-June like this, it would be different techniques, even though it's the exact same time of year every time. All the kids can be there. All the fans can be there. It's perfect.
It'd be really cool to see a Northern Classic.
Yeah.
Really
that'd be really cool for sure. And I do think they want to keep it centralized in the U.S. if they can. Right. So that kind of hurts too. Something like if Champlain even had a big enough city, it's like, man, it's so far away. They like to keep it as central as possible. But
yeah. Great comment here from Jonathan Holmes. Seems like the state of bass fishing is great as we move past COVID. Need to take this momentum and show off this sport to some other parts of the country.
Amen.
AKA West.
I think, Buffalo, Detroit, those areas are not super way the heck up there where people would travel. It's maybe a 10-hour drive from Charlotte.
Detroit, yeah.
It'd be wild to see a smallmouth classic, though. Like, you would have all-time record weights.
It would be the best live coverage, too, because it would just be a melee, just crushing them. Especially if you're having it around this time of year, early July. It would be insane. I mean,
Canada was open.
Feasibly, you could have it on Thousand Islands or Ontario, but there's really not a big enough city. But it would be incredible there, too. Down by the mouth of the lake somewhere. Clinton area, Watertown.
I think if you take the expo out of the equation, I think from an attendance standpoint, the St. Lawrence, Ontario is not a problem. I mean, Waddington had like records for attendance.
110,000.
Yeah. But
in Syracuse gets a good turnout. They usually have the Oneida tournament around the New York State Fair.
Yeah.
Like they would usually always time them at the same time, so they had really good turnout at those two.
Could always do an Erie Classic out of Sandusky.
Yeah.
Or Cleveland or something wild that nobody ever fishes.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true.
You got the harbors over there. If someone, Brock Mosley wants to go hit largemouth or someone wants to, I mean, they're big in there. I mean, you could, I don't know if you're going to win it, but if it's post spawn, smallies and they lose a little weight, could the largemouth who have already spawned probably a lot sooner in that shallower water, could those, 4.5 pounders, 5 pounders you can catch there and consistently, could it work? Could it play? Maybe that could be cool. I mean, it is nice if you have a place that's not going to be like one dimensional, like everyone's got to catch, it's just the best drop shotter and you know what I mean? Sturgeon Bay or somewhere. I don't know. Like it is nice if there is some other element that's going to possibly come into play. Like could largemouth play or just one or two, maybe a day. It's a mixed bag. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a good topic.
Yeah, we're gonna start moving on to the Bass Kayak Classic here. But Destin, before we let you go, this is something that you and I have actually we talked about. I think last night when I was driving. Aaron Schimmel has a comment here, and it says, "With the growth of viewership now being clicks, low catch counts can't be good for the sport." I think this year, and I could be entirely wrong. My history isn't like of a Ken Duke. Somebody that can reminisce on the past, entirety of bass fishing and tell you exactly what went on which year. But this year, it seems like every single tournament, almost, you guys have been hit with some drastic weather change. Mm-hmm. Days canceled, postponements. Like it's been a very adverse year for folks on the Elite Series.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us were talking about that too, just like how we'd had so much different, changing conditions throughout the season and some really tough fisheries. But I mean, ultimately, it was pretty much the same for everybody, unless you had prior knowledge of the fishery. But I mean, it was just a tough year. It's been a tough year for fish catches. Obviously, fish catches are what gets clicks, and fish catches are what keeps viewers entertained. I think last year, even though we had those fall tournaments and they were tougher, I don't know. I feel like there was more intrigue in that to a lot of viewers. Even
I think Gunnersville was like one of the most tuned in lives of like all time in the fall, wasn't it?
Which one?
Gunnersville.
I'm sure, because it's a lake with such prestige, and then you go there at such a different time of year that, I mean, you're seeing guys struggle, and you're seeing guys that normally know how to fish that like struggle. I mean, including myself. Day two, like it was tough. It was really tough to adjust, and the water was actually dropping there day two. And I mean, you saw a lot of guys kind of catch them or not catch them and then catch them. So it was always a flip-flopping and really entertaining just to see guys out of their element and out of their comfort zone. A lot of their tournaments have become kind of like a structured where it's you go here during the spawn, you go here in the summer, and you go there. That threw everybody a curveball. And honestly, I had a couple of tough ones in the fall, but I had a couple of really good ones in the fall. And I think I liked it. I mean, because it really I felt every tournament, it was an even playing field, especially in the fall. I mean, I'd never been to Santee Cooper. That was my best tournament of my Elite Series career. You know, just went up there and started chucking around and doing all kinds of different stuff and just found fish. You know, and a lot of guys didn't have experience there either that time of year. So we were all in kind of the same boat, and I did enjoy that. I mean, I didn't enjoy how late we ended our season. It is a testament to Bass to get our season in last year. That was, I mean, what they did was incredible just to be able to fish it. But, yeah, I think that fall swing really was cool, and I would not mind, you know, throwing in some curveballs in that regard as far as, like, timing of places and, you know, things like that.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, the low catch counts, in my opinion, it's like I don't think it affects the you know, the growth of the sport really, because nobody – so I golf when I'm not fishing. That's my only other hobby I've got, right? You know, don't much else, right? But I watch golf because I play golf, and nobody watches golf unless they actually play golf. There's no reason. It's boring. It's slow. You don't understand it. But like, no one really watches bass fishing unless you fish. There's certain sports that you don't watch unless you do them, and that's just the way it is. Golf, they say, it's an obsession, not a hobby. It's the same way with fishing because it's so intricate. There's so much to it. It's an obsession, not a hobby. So therefore, we watch it, even like Destin's saying, in those tough tournaments because it's intriguing to us because we've been there in the fall. We know how tough it is, and that's like the U.S. Open or the Masters. It's like the toughest of. They set up the courses so hard. Golfers love it because it's hard, man. To me, that's you know. I mean, obviously, raise your hand if you play football. Anybody play football here? No, but we watch it. Well, I mean, we play it, we throw it in the backyard.
That didn't turn out well.
Right. Well, you get what I'm saying, like professional. I should have said like pro football.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
But we've done it. But like, it's football and basketball and sports that are athletic and are fast-paced. People watch them, even if they don't do them, because they're entertaining. It's a way you can get people together. You can't do that with our sport. Therefore, I don't think it's hurting. The fish catches is hurting as much as people think, because no one was just flipping by and like waiting. But no one has that feeling, understands how hard it was when Steve Kennedy hooked that fish. Unless you've a fish and you've hooked one, and like you see how your heart's pounding in a tournament, even for like a 14-incher, nobody would even understand that if they're just an average person who's never fished. So they would never get it. So I don't think it really affects it too much. We just need to get more people doing the sport, which means everybody out there listening, watching. You just got to invite your friends to go fishing with you, because once they do it, they understand it, then they're more likely to tune in. And I honestly, perfect segue, as we probably say goodbye to Destin here in a minute, that's the area of the sport. I feel like kayak fishing has the ability to grow the sport more than any other part of the sport aspect, because the playing fields are limited, right, Destin? You guys have only so many lakes you can choose. There's probably 40 or 50 around the country that can hold that many boats, that can bring you guys in. And every person that's a local on that lake will tell you the same thing. This freaking lake is too crowded. Everybody is fishing. It's overpopulated. Well, in golf, you just build more golf courses. If your sport gets popular, let's just build more golf courses. You can't do that. The only way to continue to grow the sport is to actually use lakes and places and rivers and access places the kayak can go, and we can grow it. The only person who doesn't benefit from that, or maybe they actually do in a trickle-down situation, is the Mercuries, the Yamahas, the Skeeters, the Bass Cats. I mean, maybe a guy gets in a kayak and someday he does get into a boat too. I've seen it happen, right? But they're the only ones. Everybody else, our bait companies, line companies, rod companies, everybody in the whole sport grows. And quite frankly, to be honest with you, most all that dollars circles right back around to most of the guys that are doing it professionally out of the boats, because the kayaks were not there yet. So that money actually ends up trickling back to the pros on that side. And I think that's the best way to continue to grow up. But we have to stay in our own lane, which, by the way, if you go read my articles on Bassmaster.com, I talk about how kayaks got to stay in our own lane, stay separate. We're not in competition with the bass boats. We want to be the perfect counterpart to continue to grow what you guys have already started for us, and we're very thankful for that and are big fans. So
I think they're both really great compliments to each other, honestly, because what we do is extremely, extremely expensive. And I mean, even in kayak fishing, it's getting expensive. I mean, you can make it as expensive as you want, but you can get it in introductory for a lot less money than you can, you know, in the fiberglass bass boat world. And it is a great way to get out there and compete. There's some really, really good kayak anglers, I can promise you. If you really want good competition, go do the kayak thing. And And I don't feel like they hurt each other. I think they really do complement each other.
That way.
I appreciate that, man. That's cool to hear you say that. And I know a lot of the guys in the Elite Series and any other pros are really starting to see that and feel that way. And we're gaining traction. And we're not trying to be you guys in little plastic boats. We're trying to be unique. And it's basically what it is this is the difference in sand volleyball and indoor volleyball, right? It's still the same sport. You're catching the same fish. There's a lot of similarities, but it's different. And they both have their areas. And the sport of volleyball wouldn't be as big economically if you didn't have each of those, sand and, you know what I'm saying, and indoor, because there's different lines, different balls. So it's actually like really cool that we're able to help grow the sport as a whole. But yet it's still all about the bass. It's Bass Angler Sportsman Society. It's not Bass Boat Angler Sportsman Society. Right. I mean, it's true. Which is the love of the fish is why we're here and why we do this. Really, it doesn't matter to me what you fish out of. And you might see me in a bass boat someday, man. I've considered jumping in on some stuff. Just why not? So the crossovers is there too, and they're good tools for different situations.
Yeah, Destin, I think we need to race.
I do. I love this comment. I love that you left that up so long.
Oh, dude,
Bailey thunderclouds, man.
Bailey when he's out on the water and he's like, "I'm graphing." I'm like,
Well, Jason is saying that, and Jason did a great job. Jason beat me actually 2 spots in the B.A.S.S Kayak Classic. He did a great job. And a bunch of the guys that were around the area that I was at were teasing me because they all had Torpedoes, and they smoked me out of the launch. And I'm back there like going like crazy trying to keep up with them.
Yeah, I was like, that's not fair. You're out there like, and they're like, fast.
Just running
barefoot. It was just funny. I get there, and they're like, dude, what took you so long? And I'm like, I don't have a Torpedo. They're like, you don't have a motor? And I'm like, no, I don't.
But Bailey doesn't have to work out after because he just held like 10 miles in a day.
Yeah.
Full purpose.
Jason actually texted me. He said Bailey has quads of steel. That's what he told me. He said
he does
because he actually said that you beat him to spots. You beat him. And I actually pulled the top 10. We had a top 10 round table, and I believe 5 of the top 10, 4 or 5, did not have a motor. So sometimes it works out where you don't have to. We'll get into that later because the winner of the whole thing didn't need a motor. You didn't need anything. You could have caught his fish from the bank where he was.
He was a genius. He was a genius.
He was. Yeah, he was. So we'll get into that.
I think that takes it back to the point too that bass are a lot more simple than we credit them for.
Keep it simple, stupid.
100%.
I tell myself that all the time.
Yep.
100%. It goes back to that point where Hank was saying what I was saying. We try to be too versatile, try to learn everything. And unless you know exactly when to use that tactic, how the bite feels, everything, and you need so much time in the water to make that happen. It's just you're just kind of good at everything, and you need to be great at a few things to win. You've seen what it takes to win these things. It's something truly special. You need to be great at some tactics.
To make the cut, you got to be good at a little bit of everything, but to win, you have to be good at 2 things, and the conditions have to fit what you want to do and be confident in what you're doing.
You have to be a specialist, yes.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, it's picking the right things to be a specialist.
Yeah.
Because there's a few things, flipping, deep cranking, like finesse fishing. You got to be a specialist at the right things that consistently, win.
Right.
Well, Destin, we're gonna translate over into the B.A.S.S Kayak Classic, but before we let you go, is there anything you'd like the folks to know before you guys, the Elite Series, heads north?
No, but tune in. There's going to be a lot more fish catches than there was earlier this week.
Oh, yeah.
Champlain has got more fish than anywhere I've ever been in my life. So that's just such a fun place. I'm looking forward to our northern swing.
Well, we're rooting for you, buddy. And we always appreciate every time you come on the show and help us out.
Thank you, guys.
That's good, my friend.
Good meeting you, Drew, too.
Yeah, thanks, Destin. See you, buddy.
See you, dude. The B.A.S.S Kayak Classic. The inaugural event, the first one of its kind. I shouldn't say of its kind because there's the Hobie TOC, there's been the KBF National Championship, but there's been the first event of its kind with the label of B.A.S.S. B-A-S-S.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things we're going to get into about this, Drew. Because obviously you and I both competed in it. you actually made it to the Bassmaster Classic stage. You did what so many have, or the I should say the 136 that didn't really came here for and what to do. You did just that. So we're gonna get
146. 146. Don't shortchange yourself.
I was saying 136 because there's 10 that actually accomplish what they wanted to do.
Oh yeah. You're right. I missed that there.
We guys actually have some funny comments coming in really fast before we dive into this event. Landon Tucker, a good buddy of ours in the MPFL. Grass. I'm not going to have 3, okay? I'm getting rid of Lawrence. We're rocking 2. We're getting 360 on the Hobie, so that's going to be pretty slick. Look out for some videos on that. But
shout out to Landon. I was able to meet Landon when I was in the Bass Tank booth, and just a great guy. I've been following all the MPFL stuff, watching him, and those guys can really catch them. Obviously, you know about John.
Doing a great job over there.
Second win, Sukup's second win of the year.
Yeah.
Wreaking havoc. But I think first things first, Drew. Andrew, I like that you can have an outside perspective on this, and also because you're in the boat. We value your opinion, and so somebody who's been in a boat their entire life, your perspective of seeing the kayak game being brought to this stage. So please feel free to.
It's awesome. It's absolutely awesome because you guys get to fish lakes that boaters like Possum Kingdom probably can't hold a 50 or 100 boat tournament. You might get like the weekend warrior derbies there of 10 to 25 boats. But there's so many little lakes out there that hold just absolute giant fish. And on top of giant fish, have absolute numbers of fish that you guys can expose and bring surface and a lot of fun to the fishing world. I honestly would love to see like live coverage in kayak derbies more, where let's say they put a couple like John boats or bass boats in and on trolling motor only lakes and follow you around with a camera and give you a mic to talk. I think that would be just so cool. It's you guys are opening an entire different world to bass fishing, and it's awesome. And that's like my biggest takeaway from it. And congrats to your top 10, Drew.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I managed a 4th place finish, and actually,
top 5, correct?
Top 5. There we go. I'll shout out to
Mark,
Jason Offord. Him too. We're gonna get to that, but Jason Offord did send me a cool stat that I need Ken Duke here to kind of like be saying this, but I did want to say something that's pretty cool that he found for me and he sent to me. He said, Drew, do you realize you are the only kayak angler that's ever walked across the FLW Cup championship stage on the kayak side? Because they had a KBF, they had a championship as well when they teamed up with Kayak Bass Fishing before.
It was
the whole thing all.
It was in conjunction with Ouachita, right?
Yeah, Ouachita and the Bassmaster Classic stage on the kayak side. That was a pretty cool stat. I thought. I was like, dude, you just made me feel really special, man. Like that is actually true. I'm the only one who's done both. So that was pretty neat. But yeah, I feel like I got and I was talking to Matt Panger, and he said, look, dude, you were in second place after day 1 with 100 inches, and day 2 I did really well. My score on day 2 would have got me 6th place on day 1. It was like 92 inches, 91 and a quarter. I believe that was like 6th place day 1. So I had a 2nd place day finish and basically what was a 6th place day finish. And I didn't hold my place. I thought I probably could have won, may have won even, but I dropped. And that just tells you I just got beat. I couldn't really do anything different. I just got beat, and just a huge congrats. And now we'll get to our big congrats and mad props to those guys up top. Mark who won it. I mean, just unbelievable. And Joe was right behind him. And I've got some stats I'll pull up and show you guys on my spreadsheet to the length to weight calculator to show you how many pounds they actually had for 2 days. I can share my screen if you want, Bailey, and show that off now or whatever you want. But
let it rock.
This is pretty ridiculous, guys.
Mark Pendergraft won with 209 and a quarter inches, which for a lot of people who may not know, that he had a giant bag. I believe what he said is he almost had 40 pounds on day 2, which is absolutely absurd. We'll get this up here, Drew.
Yeah, we'll see what this says. And I put my fish in there too, just because whatever. I mean, shout out to Brad Case, who was 3rd, but I put their stringers up here. And this is a length to weight calculator. Now, granted, these fish were, I think, fatter. Like they were very fat and gorged on bait. So you probably could add a little bit of weight there. But he had his first day was a 21.27, and second day was 34.69. I would probably say he's right. Those fish were fat. It probably was a little bit bigger, closer to 38. And then Joe had a 29 or 30 pound bag and a 24.4. So if you add that up, that's unreal, you know? And I've actually been talking to B.A.S.S. and Dwayne Wally with Tourney X, and I said, look, we need to put this length to weight calculator in a separate column in our standings, because the overall bass boat world, you guys go by weight. They don't really know what 100 inches means, what 93 means, what, 70, they don't know that, you know what I mean? But everyone knows what a 10 or 15 or 20 pound bag means, you know what I mean, weight. So we need to get that in a column that says estimated weight, just so that, people can understand what these guys are doing out there, because it's pretty impressive. I don't think anybody in the world, I'm serious, no one in the world would have won that tournament other than Mark and Joe. I mean, I just don't see that anybody else catching anything like that. Do you guys? I mean, that's insane.
Bailey, you're muted.
I just realized I was muted.
Yeah,
Sorry, I was pulling up the Tourney X standings over here. I didn't want to overcrowd Drew with my noise. There's a lot of guys that you say, "Oh, how'd you do?" Like, because you mentioned you'll have a kayak tournament. And you're like, "Oh, I won with say 84 inches," and they're sitting there like, "Cool." Yeah. Like they don't understand it. But which is fine. Like you don't expect them to, because unless you have a minimum size and you need a keeper, you're really not going to measure your fish from in a bass boat. You're not. So when you get asked that, I mean, it's, on Drew and I's level, when you say you caught a 20-inch bass, like that's a damn good fish. That's at least a 5-pounder in most cases. It's sure you get some fish that might be, longer on average, and obviously they have their own variable. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share my screen, because I actually have the Tourney X up, where I'm going to show the folks some of the pictures from the guys of the fish that they caught. Let's see, share screen. Some of this stuff is pretty incredible, because these fish are giant. And actually, one of the fish, let me full screen this here. One of the fish that, and Drew, I believe you saw this as well, but Ryan Lambert posted one of the kayakers. A guy, after the tournament was over, the guy was fun fishing afterwards, caught a 25-inch bass. Like that thing, easily, you're talking 10, 11-pound range.
Absolutely.
So Joe McElroy, I believe I pronounced his last name correctly, was leading day one, 107 inches, astronomical. Here's his 22-inch bass here.
Yeah, I mean, these fish are fat.
Very fat. Like he's looking. They almost, and Drew, they kind of look like pre-spawners, the way that their bellies are, because their belly isn't low. Their belly's more towards their face, so you can tell it's not really a feed bag weight. It's more of like, it looks like almost like they have eggs. But
yeah, I mean, who knows?
What do you think that fish weighs? I mean, for me, I'm talking 6.5, almost 7 pounds.
Well, I'll tell you what the calculator said. That was his 22-incher?
Yes.
The calculator says 6.4, but we can tell it's very fat. So I'm going to say probably 7.
That's a very big fish.
Yeah. No doubt about it.
Let's see if he has some other ones that are insanely fat. Like that one looks bigger than his 22-incher. That one looks bigger than that, because look how tall that fish is.
Yeah, I was going to say that fish is thicker than the length of his hand.
Yeah, its eyes are bigger. I mean, dude, that's basically it's 22. Look at it. I mean, it's like not 22 by 1/16 of an inch. Look at that. So it's 22.
He could have made it 22 if he wanted to.
It was he probably could have.
He probably could have. Which actually makes it interesting, because the total.
Yeah, they were pretty close.
He could have been really close.
Yeah.
But let's dive in here.
Joe may have
Gregory's here sitting in. Let's see your.
I had a good one there. Yeah, I had one good one there. See, I made this one touch the 1/4 of an inch. See, I made it.
See, that's a big fish.
Yeah, it was a big one. It was. Mine were not as fat. Mine were definitely post-spawn fish.
But that fish is built.
It was big. Yeah, it was a good fish.
Yeah.
So you can see how much trash my boat. Every picture of my boat, all my pictures, it's dirty. It's a cluster. Limbs, branches are always in there. It's a mess.
Where is this? Here, look. This is impressive. This is absolutely insane. Look at the size of that freaking fish. 24.5 inches. Like you're talking over 10. That's a 10-pounder. I would confidently I would place money in saying that's a 10-pounder.
Dude,
There was multiple fish of that caliber that were caught. Let's see. There was 23 and 3/4. I mean, it's hard to put it in perspective how big these fish are from a simple photo like that. But like that what I would say is over 9.
So I just put that 24.5 in the link to weight calculator, and it says 9.16, I believe. So, but here's the deal though. Like when a fish is that big, I mean, dude, they eat meals that are literally a pound sometimes. You know what I'm saying? So,
right.
That fish, depending on the time, could have been 10.5, depending on when he caught it. Could have also been, at certain times of the year that's lean, could have been 8.5. You know what I mean? But I think that's potentially a 10-pounder.
Right. I could have sworn there was another 24-incher caught on day 1.
Is there a big bass thing on this at all at the bottom? I can't remember if there is.
Let's see.
I thought at the very bottom, is it Tourney X that does this? Maybe not.
I believe so. Well, I thought they did, but I guess
they did something like that. But day 2 had some. Obviously, Mark's big sack came on day 2 here. And
That's
just giants.
I mean, granted, it's not. If you took how fat McElroy's fish were and compared it with how long Pendergraft's were, it's deadly. But 24-inch fish, regardless, is a giant, and that's an old fish. 24-incher and then 23 and 3/4. Like that one almost looks like it's older. Look how old that.
So that's like a 15-year-old, 20-year-old fish. That's a grandpa right there, grandma.
That head looks like a grouper.
It does. That's ridiculous.
Let's see in here. Like Brad, I fished around a lot throughout the tournament. Look how crazy that fish is.
Look how fresh off the bed it is too.
Yeah, that's insane. He actually told me he didn't know if he was like, I didn't know if they were, just got done spawning or if they were chasing all that bait. 'Cause it was brim beds right there, he said, and he didn't know if it was just from them chasing them so hard in all the rock that was in the area. I don't know, but I think, like you said, I think it's got to be a fresh off the bat. I don't know. That's pretty raw.
Yeah. So that 22 and 3/4 that Brad had caught. We put this back down into here. That Brad had caught. It was almost 7 pounds. That's pretty crazy. I mean, it's interesting because these fish, from length to weight, makes it so interesting because in practice I caught a 22 on the dot and it was only 5'6". Whereas Brad catches one 3/4 of an inch longer and it's almost 7.
Right.
It's crazy because those fish across the board were in such different stages that it could really kind of fluctuate, how much they're actually weighing, which can create it makes things really interesting. Let's see, let me get this off here. It makes things really interesting, when trying to translate to, what the most of the bass fishing realm kind of related to. But Jason Alford here has a really good point I think that we should talk about, and it's thoughts on month off limits. Personally, I wish it was off limits from the moment it was announced. I would have absolutely loved that. And I think because that's how the elites do it. If you want to bring kayak fishing to this legitimacy, I think you need to start holding standards. I'm not saying exactly like the boat world, but if you get close, the more close you get with the standards and your rules and how serious you take it, the more legitimacy and the more respect it's going to be put on that brand. But I really enjoyed the off limits because granted, HFA still played a major factor. The top 2 guys were locals. Correct, Drew?
I don't know if Joe was. I thought Joe was from Tennessee. I could be wrong.
Oh, Joe's from Alabama. So excuse me.
Is Alabama?
But the winner, Mark, is actually from Fort Worth. So HFA played relatively in the tournament here. But I thought the off limits was important because you can get guys because kayak fishing in general is a blue collar sport. There could be guys that qualified for this event, took off a lot of vacation time to get down there to practice. But that there's guys that could go down it's kind of like a Bassmaster Open in the sense of you could have a guy down there for 2 weeks practicing every single day and know the whole lake where, now you make it to a month off limits and you only have 2.5 official days of practice, which really puts an emphasis on us kayak anglers because there's so much pressure on where you launch because you can't pick up and go 10 miles and get there in 10, 15 minutes.
Right.
You're going to go 10 miles in a kayak. You're going to get there in like a couple hours. Like it adds a whole emphasis on the decision making you get. So at least for me, and Drew, I'm very curious on your practice as well. But for me, I picked a section of the lake with the conditions that we've been hit with, which is another factor we're going to talk about. I picked the lower end of the lake because it translates more to me. Being a northerner, the clearer the water, the more comfortable I am. And that's one I really honed in on. And once we had day one of practice, feeling great, had schools on ledges, had one school where I had 2 casts, 2 fish for 12 pounds, feeling really good. And then when we get hit with those storms over day 1 to day 2 of practice, going from 8-10 foot of viz to less than a foot of viz overnight, that was pretty crazy. I'm curious on one, how your practice went in terms of what you ran around with.
Yeah.
We wanted to hone in on a certain area, but how did you feel with that mud too? I'm very curious.
Yeah.
On 9 yards.
Well, we joke together offline all the time about how like we love talking to each other. We love the fact, and you love the fact that we're just complete opposites. And I agree. Right. So, I'm used to the muddy water, the shallow stuff, and you like the clear and deeper stuff. So we sort of never have to worry about, I can tell you where I'm going to be, and it doesn't matter. I know I'm not going to see you there, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice having that little friendship there. But anyway, I on pre-fishing on the Sunday, just so everyone knows what happened to us, our lake opened up on Sunday. Our tournament started on Wednesday. Wednesday. So on Sunday we had the area had a lot of rain for sure, but it calmed down. There wasn't like a big mud line in this lake. And just so you know, this lake is feeding the Brazos River is feeding 200 miles of West Texas desert. When you get all that rain, it's just red coming in, and the river's always red. But imagine now you've got flooding in that river, and it was 7 foot over flood stage. That red moved its way down that lake, and usually it filters out and clears up. And there actually is a lot of salt content from the salt flats, so it actually helps it clear even more. So it gets so clear down. Once you hit mid-lake down to the dam, it gets, 20 foot of visibility. And I don't know if it even gets more than that. It probably does down there at some point. So now the fish are seeing something they never see. The mud line made its way all the way down, like you said, to your clear water, which, by the way, I think that's why such big fish were caught, because those fish don't see that very often. We were able to catch them on techniques that it's a little easier to fool them. You know what I mean? In those right. water conditions, I think that's why it actually helped down there in the end. And plus, like Matthew Scott said, another local, he said, dude, the mud is more up high. The further down the water column you get, it actually is a lot clearer than you think. So anyway, but my practice was on Sunday before the rain hit, the bad rain on Monday morning. It actually went pretty good. I found some fish that were relating to current, which is what I like to do. And I caught some good ones there, and I left. And then I was confident, and then the rain came, the mud, and I didn't even go there the next day. I went and tried some different stuff and just kind of messed around, just waited to see what was going to happen with the river and creek conditions. And I found some other plans and ideas, but it definitely ruined my original moving water plan. But in the end, the water had come down enough where I was able to find them again where I did on Sunday in a moving water situation. And I was as shocked as anybody that they were catchable in the amount of mud that was coming in and relating to current the way they were. So that's kind of what I did. And I was just super, super shocked. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up a part of my practice video here and I showed this to you because I felt super proud that I pulled a Drew Gregory and went up, found a waterfall and caught like an 18 out of it. But it was really interesting because I think someone with a game plan like yourself, obviously there's certain situations where conditions can change, but for the most part, the guys I think that stayed shallow from the beginning had the better game plan because things aren't going to change too much. When that water gets dirty and then you move shallow, I think it's a lot harder to kind of pick up an area because you didn't see it prior to the mud. And also, I think that shallow bite is better because when that water gets muddy, there's really only specific targets that you're going to see those fish at, which actually I thought of that case, but I was actually proven wrong by Brad Case, who was around my area and completely wrecked them and made me look a damn fool. But it was really interesting from having a mindset of myself where I want to fish offshore. Because in most cases, and Drew, we talk about this all the time. In most cases, if I find something offshore, most chances are I'm going to have it to myself. Whereas if a couple guys find a creek arm that you want to spend some time in, chances are you're screwed.
Yeah. Cannibalizing each other for sure.
Exactly. And then me being a northern guy, liking clear water, seeing that mud, drop to less than a foot, it made me scramble and made me kind of think only thing I can do is just go to the bank, pick up a big flipping stick, and kind of go to work. What I saw some guys do was really interesting that I never thought of, and I give them a lot of props to, is they went to the same areas that, well, I think, like when it gets muddy, you go to the bank. I literally go to the bank, and I find stuff that's connected to the bank, whereas that's not always the case. You can go to a 6-8 foot range where maybe there's shell bars, maybe there's stumps, or there's fish maybe hanging off a little bit. Where that's what Brad Case had found, and I don't want to dive into too much on what Brad did because I don't want to speak for him. I don't even know if he wants it to be talked about. But basically, he found a deal in that 6 to 8 foot range and found a lot better quality fish than I did. Because the dilemma I had, and Drew, I'm curious if this happened for you too. Day 2 of the tournament, the water was falling. Now, so not only did it turn to mud, but it started falling. So you get this mud thinking, okay, I need to go to the bank. And then you get the water falling, and then you're thinking, okay, I got to get away from the bank. And then you have this dilemma. Whereas there's guys like yourself and like Brad and like obviously the winners that adjusted perfectly to it. I'm curious, when you saw that happening, what moves did you make?
Well, my water fell, like you said, it fell a little bit, and there weren't as many fish in my school that I'd found. And so first of all, you don't typically find a school of fish in the places I go. It's like one here, one there. You move a lot. I was lucky. Midday, day 1, I found a school of fish. They were relating to a current break, and you would throw in there I was using a Project Z chatterbait by Z-Man, and that first day, and they only wanted green pumpkin and pre-fish, and they were biting the white stuff, kind of the white and chartreuse. But this is weird. They would only hit that darker color, which, by the way, little side note, I feel in murky water, you're always you need to look for like a lot of people will believe in black and blue or darker colors, and some people use white. I feel like all that matters is you find something that contrasts as much as possible. It's kind of like Bailey. You make all these graphics for a serious angler podcast, whatever. Whenever you make a graphic and you're using like a piece of the sky or something, you either like have to use white or like black. You need whichever one contrasts the most so that people can read it. So that's why I feel like most of the time, if you're a believer in the black and blue, awesome. I don't think it matters if it's white, black, and blue, as long as you just find the most contrasting. And usually those two colors are equally contrasting to that mud. So I was using white and pre-fishing. It was working. For whatever reason, they didn't want it, which I thought was super odd. And I went to the green pumpkin, darker color stuff, chatterbait. And for one of the rarest times I've ever seen, there was a large quantity of fish in a small area in a moving water situation that wasn't that big of an area. And I would skip it up in there and it would kind of hit the bank and skip up in there. And they would literally be on before when I engage the reel, which I engage instantly, usually I'm really, really particular about making sure my bait's moving the second it hits the water, not letting it drop at all and then move it. I always want to have everything moving. Spinner baits, chatterbaits, when it hits, buzz baits, they would be on like literally when it hit. Insane. And there was a ton of them there. And there was only that many there because the water was up and the clarity was the way it was. And I feel like there was a shad thing going on there. A bunch of shad were up there as well. The next day when it dropped, to kind of circle back around to your question finally, there weren't as many there. And I didn't catch as big ones there, and there weren't as many. So that's what that's how it affected me. I just didn't get quite as many bites, and I just burned it down. I mean, I would let it rest for like 2-3 hours, and I would go back, and you could pick up one or two. But I mean, I felt lucky when I got my last 18 something that second day to get me up to I think 91 3/4, and I was happy about it. But yeah, it was nuts, man. It was a really cool event, and it just shows when the water gets high, guys. Our situation was different than Ray Roberts because their water was high and it flooded. They couldn't control that amount of water, so the lake flooded. They were able to open floodgates in our lake, and it stayed basically at full pool, a teeny bit over, but you never had flooded bushes. You see what I'm saying? So our fish actually grouped up. Like, it actually forced those fish to concentrate either in a current situation like I did or the main lake, it grouped them up tighter than ever before. And I think when people found those schools like I did, and some of the obviously Brad and Mark and Joe, the guys who really crushed it, they were there again the next day. They just grouped them up tighter. It was really a really fun tournament.
Yeah, it was very intriguing to see kind of how things all went down. And you mentioned, they obviously school up, and there's some shad stuff in the beginning. And I had found a shad spawn deal on seawalls, and I never saw a single person on seawalls whatsoever. And I think because I seen a couple guys hit it, but they didn't hit it correctly that first, at least the first day. First day, it wasn't a thing. It got too muddy in my area, and I didn't even have a shad spawn deal. But you basically had to get, I was throwing a Berkeley Chapo, you basically had to get it inches from that wall and go around that wall, and that's when you'd get hit. And there were some 18, 19-inch fish I caught doing that. That was gone, but later in the day, I came back by the seawalls, and I caught it a 17 and an 18 on a Nico rig, 4 to 6 foot off that seawall. And that was day one, towards the end. That should have clicked in my head that when I go back to my area on day two, that I should, when that water's falling, that I should have pushed off. But me being stubborn and not making the right adjustment, I stayed connected to the bank. And I think that's what burned me. But I wanted to show you this to make you proud that I actually pulled a Drew Gregory.
All right, let's see it. Let's see it.
You're talking up in the waterfall in here.
There we go.
Now disregard my absolute garbage hook set here because I was very confused. I had gotten my jig. I go to flip my jig off to my left, and it goes over a branch. And I was very confused why it was running downstream. So I was like wondering. I was like, "What is going on?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's a fish."
Nice.
Awful hook set, and that was a decent fish. Right
oh
there.
yeah, that's a nice fish, man.
18, 19 incher. That current and everything. I don't know how you do it. It was like chaos. I'm very curious how many times you've been wrapped up in this stuff.
Oh, all the time, man. It
was decent.
That's a real nice fish, man. That there was that pattern was happening. The back of those pockets was having some clear water run in. That was happening. The only problem was with that many anglers, you could never run that, and you know what I mean. Somebody else was going to get to other pockets like that before you, and that's why I was really fortunate that I caught fish like that, by the way, in the back of some other pockets. I caught a 19 and a quarter in a spot like that, but I had to run to the spot I really found them to get most of my length. And the second day my water did clear up a good bit, and I actually switched back. I went to the stealth blade chatterbait to get a little bit stealthier, just to give them a different look, plus the water cleared up. And then they were back on that that white, it wasn't a pure white. It's kind of like a color that's a little translucent. I forget what it's called.
It's silhouetted.
Yeah.
There's like three different ones.
Opaque.
Three different.
It might have been
ones. Spot remover.
I think that's what it was. Got like
a little chartreuse in it.
Yeah. And then I used a diesel minnow in the back that wasn't a pure white either. That was it wasn't beer run. I think it was called Slam Shady. It's a really good color from Z-Man. It's called Slam Shady. It's not a pure popping white, but it's got a bunch of like little maybe flakes in it, so it's like a off-colored-ish white. So it's very natural, and they were hitting that a lot better on the second day. Plus, dude, when I pulled into my spot the second day, I saw no less than 15 birds in there, and shad were popping out everywhere, and there was a major shad thing going on that morning. So that's why I went straight to that spot. Actually, I didn't go to that spot, didn't find that spot actually, because I pre-fished in that area and they were not there like that, which is kind of cool that I ended up finding it in the tournament on day one in the middle of the day. I was like anybody, man, and the difference between winning and being in 50 something place is so small. I always thought I wasn't going to get a limit. I still didn't have a limit. It was like 11 something. I stumbled onto that spot. I'd fished it pre-fishing, didn't get them there. They weren't stacked up there, and I found it. And then the next day, wisely, I think, went straight there, obviously, because I wanted to hit it, let it reset, hit it as many times as I could during the day. But when I first got there, I knew then it was special. There was 15 birds all lined up on the bank, just going to town, and other fish were rolling. I caught hybrids there. I caught whites there. I caught, I think, one catfish. I caught drum. I caught everything there. Everything was stacked up there. It was but what was crazy is once I burned it down, you couldn't catch another fish there. And I think the water level eventually at the end of that second day dropped back out almost to what it was on Sunday. And I have a feeling the next day, if you'd have gone there, you would have caught maybe a fish or two, but it would have been nothing like the magical spot. It just shows you how small those windows can be. We talk about offshore fishing. You guys do. There's feeding windows. There's magical times. And that's what it is shallow too. Whenever you do find them stacked up relating to current, there's a magical window. It's not like they're just always there at the spot. No, it was just timing.
Yeah.
So
It was really interesting, and it was one thing that I'm really curious to see what Prendergraph, the Mark who won the tournament, has to say. Mark's actually going to come on the show either later this week or sometime next week to kind of really dive into detail from him, from the source on how he actually won it. But from an outsider's view, and Drew, you may have actually talking to him closer than I did, being that you were on stage with him. But basically it came down to he was just cranking a boat ramp, and the right fish were there. Did he mention anything else further to you, Drew, about what he did with his plan? And obviously, like I mentioned, we'll go in deeper with Mark later.
Yeah. All I know is that it's a really cool story. You're going to have to tune in to your podcast to hear it. And I haven't listened to him on any podcast yet, but I know that this is so genius, man. I love it. Tournaments. So here's my theory. Tournaments are always won. Like we talked about a little bit with Destin, they're always won on something truly magical and special. That's why Brian Thrift says, I don't even pre-fish the bank. He always looks for that magical offshore spot because he can always go to the bank and catch fish. He knows how to do it. He's been doing it his whole life. He knows he's got that dialed. That's what I look for. I look for this off the wall, hooked on wild waters, river bass, and sort of wild magical spot. They're always won on something magical. You can do well and cash checks by just flipping the bushes at the classic like everybody else and just be good at it. But if you have something truly special, that's when you really usually can blow away and win a tournament. And what Mark did, everybody is launching from this ramp because all that clear water was at the southern end of the lake. You had, I don't know how many people were at his ramp, but I bet you it was 30 to 40. And there's only 46 people in the tournament. So I bet you had 30, 40, 50 people at his ramp. Everybody, quote, blasts off, right? And everyone goes out, right? And he went out with them. And for all I know, he just U-turned back around and sat right there at that boat ramp and just caught all of his fish right there. They were underneath everybody the whole time. So that's what was crazy and magical about what he found. It was genius. It just happened to happen.
And I can hear the comments already of, when they're waiting around to, like you said, Drew, blast off. Guys open it, getting ready, getting set, turn on the grass, and like, oh, looks like there's fish down there. And then they go off to their area. Well, let alone there was giants in there. And it's really funny. I was talking with Mark. I had ventured down that way. I had found one school that was offshore in there, but it was all like 14, 15 inches. So I didn't really chalk it up to anything I wanted to look into. But I graphed that ledge off the ramp that he was on. And I was like, there's a lot of fish sitting off of that, but they were sitting off in like 25 to 30. And with the mud, it didn't click for me. So I didn't even think about it. I'm like, those are probably striper because the only fish I caught deep with the mud were striper. Mm-hmm. So I kept moving and I went to the other side and I flipped the bluff wall, threw a glide bait, whatnot. But now I saw like the Bass posted day 2 with the photos and they show Mark and they show that boat ramp and they show him cranking way off of that down towards that ledge. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I'm an idiot. Like you can't count stuff out. You have to at least give these certain things that where you have the slightest hunch, give it a chance. It was kind of crazy, but like literally the dude is, as we talked earlier, simple, stupid, but goddamn, he's a genius for doing it.
Yeah, that was genius.
I want to know how much he was sweating that morning, hoping that everyone else just left, that no one stayed on that ramp.
Yeah, I don't know, man, but it was incredible. So I think it's a really cool story. A lot of cool stories came from this one. I thought it was a great championship, and Bass did a great job. Everybody involved, everybody did a great job. Obviously there's things we'd like to see changed, and that's probably for another podcast. But I just want to say thanks to them for acknowledging, bringing us into the fold, the kayak, and realizing this is, like I've used this analogy before, but, soccer is the most popular sport in the world because everybody can do it. You just need a ball. And that's one of the reasons. Every sport that's low cost of entry, everybody can do, has the ability to be much bigger. And kayak fishing is our sport, soccer. We can get more people into this. And I just was happy to be out there and see Bass, really doing it right. And just to represent all the kayak anglers, and a big thanks to not just the people at Bass, but thanks to everybody, whether it's, Hobie or Kayak Bass Fishing, anybody, any local tournament trail director, anyone who's had a hand in growing this and believing in this sport, that we are different and unique, and we have our own stories and personalities and characters and unique kayak setups and strategies. Everyone who's believed in this from the very beginning, I was happy to be there to represent them. And I just want to say thanks to all those people who have put in the time and effort, because Bass would never have gotten into the game if it wasn't for the hard work, blood, sweat, and tears from so many of those people. And it was just really cool experience, man. And I'm so glad you were able to be there too. And we just had a good time. And I'm already qualified for next year, man. So we got to get you. Are you qualified, Bailey? We got to get you qualified.
I thought it was only the winner that gets the requal.
No, dude, there's already been 2 events. I fished Eufaula and got 7th in top 10%.
Oh, I'm not. Unfortunately, I'm not able to fish a Bass Nation event this year.
Oh, bummers.
So maybe in years coming. But
years coming. Yeah. Unless
maybe I could squeak down to Chesapeake, but I don't know how we're gonna.
Or if your state has a chapter, does your state have a Bass Nation chapter?
It does, but they've already started their circuit, and with work and the tournaments I already have going on.
One I sucked them away from a few kayakers.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, it was a legit tournament, and it really added a level to kayak fishing, to add a level of legitimacy, putting that Bass logo on, getting on the stage. And there's a lot that we can talk about that they did well, because they did, they're taking a chance on kayak fishing, which you saw FLW do, get bought out by MLF and basically just thrown to the streets where they didn't want to do anything with it. Bass is doing something with it, but I want to say on the flip side, it is its first year, and like everything that's new, there's a lot of changes and a lot of improvements that need to be made. So yes, they did an amazing job, and I'll say that to Dwayne Wally. Dwayne Wally put a lot of effort into it. That guy gets a lot of messages on the daily, has to deal with a lot of things. Obviously, Creative Attorney X. A lot of props to Dwayne. But I think there's a couple things that, and hopefully what they can do, as Drew, we told you over dinner one night, was like hopefully get someone like yourself involved, someone that can have the business side, the tournament director side, and the fan competitor side, to kind of mesh everything to make the right experience, to make everything on a better playing field. One of the first things I think that was a big chatter, I think you can agree as well, is, going out from the main announcement saying, with a full asterisk, with a full field, getting $50,000 for first, 97 total payout, and then showing up and being said, it's $20,000 for first for the classic stage, right? I think that was a lot of chatter, seeing that payout and kind of how that was structured. Not many folks really enjoyed to see that. Not that was any of my worries. My worries to get on that stage, but it was kind of an interesting deal to see the field shrink from payout wise, what I saw. But I think other than that, I think it was kind of cool, and I'll give them props. There was some coverage, like some decent coverage. I saw a couple boats running around with drones and cameras, and I had a drone on me for a little bit until I got hung up in a brush pile, and they basically said this guy's a scrub and let's leave him alone. But no, I think there's some things that did good, but I think there's also some things that they need to improve, and I'm very curious your insights into that topic.
Yeah, it almost is a whole other podcast, but so if people watching or listening, you guys, I mean, I did run a tournament trail for 10 years. I started the River Bass and Tournament Trail, so I've been on that side. I've worked with tourism departments. My first sponsor I got for the whole thing, shockingly, as I look back now, was Bass Pro Shops. I convinced them to headline sponsor the whole thing. We held the tournaments out of their stores, so I get that side. Obviously, I get the angler side, and my master's degree is in sports management. And before I did fishing for a living for full time, I was a tournament director, director of campus recreation for Lander University, which, by the way, that's where Brandon Cobb is the coach for their bass team. It's a little school in South Carolina, Lander. It's about 4,000 students right now, I bet. So I do have a lot of experience in this. I'd love to continue to help out, and they have been listening to me a little bit, but I don't ever want them to feel like I'm trying to make any of the rules, because I can't ever be a part of anything like that. The actual rules that could give me an advantage, I can't help in other ways. And but I mean, look at it. Boyd Duckett and those guys, they fish their events, and they obviously are part of a committee that makes the rules. So I think if we can get a committee together, we can talk about some stuff. We can throw some stuff out. And then it's not me, actually, Drew Gregory, doing anything, or they're not listening to one person. It's a committee. That's what we need, is a committee. And I don't know. There's a lot of things we could probably get into, but I just feel like we'd probably be here all day. But I don't know what was the one you would mention? There's one that you were asking about that was in particular.
I think it was
the one.
It was a payout structure and kind of what they did.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I would like to see. Yeah, I'd like to see. We'd obviously want to see that be more, but I think they'll have so COVID and all that had a huge effect on bass. It pushed them all back. I think now that the schedule, from what I understand, the schedule for kayak is pretty much done for the next 2 years already. We just haven't obviously been announced it. So what they need to do now is that gives them time. Now they've got some media, some coverage. They've got us on stage. They got video of that. They have some proof of how many people will show up for this thing to go to a tourism department and say, we can get 150 to 200 and something people in your little community. Cause they can take, let's say the next year's classics, it's Greenville, Anderson. They could take, I'm trying to think of a town that's nearby there. I mean, whatever, Spartanburg, or a smaller town, you know what I mean? Like Greenwood or Augusta, even close enough. They could take that information and everything they've done. They can go sell that. And then my hopes is when they sell that, they're going to get some money. It's going to trickle back down to the angler at some point. Plus, they'll hold back some money during the season, and they don't need to pay out 30 places at the championship, because the reason why Bass does that and other pro tours is because those guys need to have money to continue to make a living doing it. It's like, you can't just pay out the top 10% because so many people will starve on the Elite Series, right? So you got to pay out deep. Well, they just follow the same structure they always follow. They didn't really think like you can have a much bigger payout, which is going to, like, Mark could have won maybe 30,000 if you take away all the money from 15th place to 30th that got paid out. Move that up the top. I mean, that's more important to have that big wow factor, 30,000. And then plus, if you'd had time to get a tourism department to really give some money, you could have added more to it, and he could have probably won 40 or 50 potentially, and then they could have made some money to cover their expenses too. So we'll see those changes happen. We'll see a lot of changes, but now that they got into it and got started, sometimes you can't learn until you do it. You don't know what changes to make until you see the mistakes. Like on river bass, and I let people fish outside their kayak, but I never had in the rules you had to photograph and submit one fish before you caught another. And I never thought anyone would do this, but people that just don't know, guys were out there. A couple guys were waiting so far away from their kayak, they had fish on stringers on their belt loops. One guy, and he had his fish. He kept them alive on the stringer, and then he would walk back to his kayak and take a picture of them all at once. And so we saw another fish laying in the bottom of his kayak in one of the photos. We're like, how do you have another fish laying in your kayak, man? Like, because he had to explain himself. It looked like he was cheating. He said, no, I just had him on a stringer. Well, we never put in the rules that technically you couldn't do that. So you don't know until you do it and make the mistakes sometimes. But there definitely are things, and precedents have been set with other trails like Kayak Bass Fishing and Hobie that they could and probably should be doing already. And hopefully with the committee, we can make some changes, help them make some changes, and eventually have an Elite Series one day live. Didn't you mention something, Andrew, about live stream? You'd like to see that on kayaks earlier?
That'd be awesome.
That's where our sport's going to change. When we get this length to weight calculator column, when we get live stream and we get entry fees that are $1,500 and $1,000 or $2,000, which makes our payouts bigger. All three of those things will add up to a ton in terms of growing this sport, because no one really understands like the challenges and the entertainment factor is there in a kayak. You don't need helicopter flyovers and rock music and fast quick cuts and an edit, dude. The drama and the adventure, the chaos, and I call it a beautiful chaos, is there without any manufacturing it. You don't need it. It's going down rapids, it's going under logs, it's all the wildlife you see. It's bananas, and it's just already there naturally. So it's going to be a good entertainment product. More people are already fishing out of kayaks than bass boats to this day. It goes back to that soccer effect. If you have a bass boat, you should have a kayak too. Like, why not? If you can afford a $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 bass boat, you definitely should, get some kayaks and mothership those to some cool places with your bass boat. So the more eyeballs, this is kind of what my article on Bassmaster.com talks about. The last one I wrote, I believe, more eyeballs on the sport, you can means more clicks, more exposure. Therefore, you can argue that it's potentially can be equally, if not more valuable one day than Hank holding up that trophy. But it's just going to take time. So
yeah,
we'll get there.
Yeah, a lot of time and a lot of hard work, and a lot of credit to you, Drew, because you've been the one behind it, driving all of it. So we appreciate what you've been doing, and it's cool to see because we've talked, Drew and Andrew. Obviously, we talk about it all the time. I love both sides. I love the kayak side. I love the boat side. I mean, I really want to get into the boat side once I can actually come to a level where I can afford such a thing. But a level, that kayak scene, that kayak trail, the competitiveness of the trail, the camaraderie it has, what it kind of has to do with it has a special place for me because it's allowed me to do a lot of things that I have not been able to. So it's always going to have a place there. I mean, it's cool to see it grow, and what you've done with it is be able to see it grow and them starting to mesh in terms of, recognizing that there is a place for both. Unfortunately, there still is a group of anglers out there that are very, for some reason, whatever, anti-kayak, whatever you want to call it. It's more of, if you don't have a boat, we don't care about you type of mentality, which is kind of degrades it. But when you see a guy that goes out and you see, I'll pull him back up right here. You see.
Side note, real fast.
You see a giant get caught. It adds a legitimacy to the whole kayak deal. And like Drew, we've talked about getting some of these pros in a boat, like to come out and fish, and then watch them get beaten. You kind of see.
I don't think it's so much boaters hate kayakers fishing. It's the fact that we don't respect each other in boat lanes and big waterways. I see it all the time in Lake Erie. I'm running outside the walls, and there's a 2-foot chop as I come around the South Gap to run out, and there will be a kayaker sitting in the middle of a 2-foot chop, and you never see him in the middle of a shipping channel. It's like, yes, I understand we all have the right to the waterway, but it's like, why are you there when the visibility is poor where I'm possibly going to run over you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the situation where I see where boaters don't like kayakers. It's the same thing as boaters don't like jet skiers, because jet skiers will cut you off and stop on a dime as you're running 60 down a lake.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a safety issue, and we just need to be more aware of each other and respect each other and work with each other to come to an equal comprehension of where we should be and how we should be doing it, and then communicating that with each other.
I don't think that's more of a kayak versus boat deal, as more of it's a boater safety amongst the entire population of anglers type of deal.
Yeah. That's fair.
No, I agree. I think that it's actually, like you were saying, I don't think if it would have been like another boat there or another kayak, I just think that I see a lot of like, not animosity, but boaters that are in the bass boat world just don't like seeing more people on their water and more pressure. No one likes it when you go into somewhere, whether you're a shallow water guy or an offshore guy. You just don't like seeing a bunch of people in spots you want to be on. They just it's part to do with that, part to do with what Andrew just said, that visibility safety thing. But that's where I continue to stress, like, if we're going to make it and we're going to live in harmony with the bass boat world, we have to make sure our rules and the lakes we choose, like 8,000 acre to 20,000 more 8,000 to 20,000 acre lakes, need to get picked for our events. Because right now we're only picking sometimes. I don't think there's anything wrong with still going to a Gunnersville, going to a Fork, these big name lakes. But a lot of the times we're going to these lakes just because we're being marketed those lakes through the Elite Series, through MLF, through all this, and everyone just thinks that's just the best lakes in the country. Hello, Possum Kingdom. Lakes like that have them too, but they just don't have the dollars or the size to attract the Elite Series, so therefore we aren't marketed those places, but they're there, and they don't have as big of a budget for tourism, so it's actually perfect because kayak doesn't need that much money to come as much as Elite Series. So we need to keep going to those places and make sure our rules allow us to go in continue to be able to go all the way up the rivers and creeks that are naturally free flowing. So in my opinion, if the fish can go there, then we should be able to go there and access the way we bought a kayak to access. You know what I mean? Otherwise, why are we even doing this? Why are we in kayaks? So as long as we keep those rules like that and we keep going to lakes that are smaller like that, we won't butt nearly as much with the bass boat world, and I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, That's a great point.
Yeah.
Andrew, Drew, any other topics, things that we should note from the Bass Kayak Classic before we wrap it up tonight? We have a question here from Aaron Schimmel. With the advancements in Wi-Fi video equipment, at what point will tournaments be able to provide setups to be able to live stream? As we were talking about earlier, with kayaks, it seems this would be easy. I don't think it's a difficulty in equipment, as more of it's more funds and the more, I guess, a desire from a fan perspective to watch.
Like the overall schematics of the whole deal.
Yeah, it's gonna. So I'm sponsored by GoPro, one of my sponsors, and you can live stream now in 1080. Pretty good quality from a GoPro. Now, obviously, that'll continue to upgrade, but it's going to be a cell signal. It's going to be an issue of you can't. You have to have a production team that sets everybody up with these GoPros. That's the only way you can do it. I mean, you can't really do it any other way. Yeah, it's money. You got to have a team, logistics. There's a lot. You got to have a cell signal. Then you have to, I don't know. I mean, it's just, there's a lot that goes into it, but we're close. But the thing is, you gotta have an elite level series that has a 3-day tournament. First 2 days, everyone fishes, and you actually just you let people put GoPros on their kayaks if they want, or they can use their phone just to hold up the picture of fish and pan it by. And leading into the final day should be streamed with like 10 anglers, because you can only manage like 10 anglers in terms of a production, a producer behind the screen clicking back and forth between the action, right? You really can't manage more than 10, and those 10 need to have GoPros on them in hopes that at least 7 or 8 of them have enough signal at a time to like give you a shot. And so you take it from 100 guys to your 10 for the final day. That's how it's got to be done, guys. And then it's doable. It would be doable before you start that final day show, you can show off all the highlights from the clips from guys that, even if you just had a cell phone, you just tell them, here's what you do, shoot in this quality, just hold your fish by. And if they have a good shot from their GoPro catching a fish, it gives a lot of cool action leading up to the story, building up to this is how it happened. And now let's see what happens live on the final day. So, but it will happen. We'll get there. We'll have an elite series one day in kayak fishing. I like talking about this topic because one day somebody from Bass or someone's going to listen and hear this, and they're going to realize this is closer than we think. And the more we talk about it, the more I'll be able to still be a part of it one day and not be too old and decrepit to still get into those places I like to get into and fish the way I like to fish, which is pretty fast and furious. So, but big thanks to, back to your original thing. I was going to say big thanks to Patrick Malone and Dwayne Wally and John Stewart, all the guys from Bass for putting it on. And, I know I touched on it earlier, but big thanks to those guys and all the top 10. Congrats, man. Everyone did a great job. That we had an incredible group of guys. And I can't wait to get out there next year. And next tournament for me is going to be Hobie Bass Open Series on Lake Champlain. So I saw Ike and Ellie signed up for it. So, we're all looking to take him down, of course. So a lot of respect for Ike to jump in on those.
He loves that lake too.
And yeah, he does. And I actually heard a rumor. Todd Patrick today told me he went live and he said that he talked to AJ, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard that we can only launch from the New York side. We may not be able to launch from the Vermont side for some reason.
I heard that too, which I think is a bad move personally.
Me too. I am so bummed about that because that shrinks that lake big time. We can't really run across, 8 miles across the lake, or some of those expanses are pretty wide, 12, 15 miles.
Especially with the wind.
Yeah.
If there's an eastern wind, I mean, Ticonderoga is just going to be blown up because everywhere else is pretty much in the wide open, and you're screwed. Vermont has some of the better fishing too, which is unfortunate to see.
I know, man. I'm bummed about it. But hey, last thing I'll say is thanks to you guys for doing this podcast. I love the fact that you do follow the boater side and you follow the kayak side. That's pretty cool because as kayak fishing grows and tournament fishing, it's actually gotten me back into following competitive bass boat fishing, and it's growing the sport in terms of the bass boat side of the sport in terms of the clicks and the viewership, and we want to learn because you guys do have the live stream and all that. So I really just want to say that thanks to you guys in this podcast. I will be doing a recap as well, and I might go into more in depth of what I did on my podcast, the Hooked on Wild Waters podcast live stream tomorrow with my buddy Ken Morris, Dr. Noisewater, and so being on the lookout for that tomorrow, guys. I believe we'll go on about 8 o'clock as well. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
anybody wants to tune in on that, check it out. And
Yeah,
hey, man.
I know there's obviously we're live streaming this as well on your channel, Drew. So
Yeah.
folks, like you mentioned, if you're on the Serious Angler page, head over to Drew's page. We have links down in the description. You can go follow him, as well as from Destin from earlier. We have his links down below as well. Follow these two guys, great stewards of the sport, and Drew's done a lot for the kayak fishing realm and seeing, they're. With kayak fishing, obviously, we have a lot of places to go, but the only reason it's here is because of this guy down below and a lot of what the heart and soul he's put into it. So thank you to you, Drew. I appreciate you coming on, and obviously I appreciate our friendship. I look forward to hopefully getting after some of the national circuits next year with you, and hopefully we'll see you there. And hopefully maybe one of these times I might finish better than you, but it seems like you're just going to keep kicking my butt from now on.
Dude, it's gonna happen. I know you're gonna find that muzzleload out deep. And hey, look, it didn't happen. The wind didn't come shallow, so you needed to be out there. So you were on close. You were closer probably than I was. And you said you saw those fish at the ramp, so you were closer than you realized to taking the whole thing. So it'll happen.
Well, buddy, we appreciate you taking time out tonight. Obviously, we'll be in touch, and I'd actually really like it if depending on when Mark can come on, it'd be cool if you're free to get you to join in and get an ulterior perspective. And so if you're free the night that we're going to get Mark Pendergraph on here, it would be cool to get you on as well.
All right. Sounds good, man. Thanks, guys.
We'll talk to you.
Thanks, Andrew. See you, buddy.
Yeah, it was good seeing you.
You too.
That was, dude, the classic week is, I know it was only my second one, but I don't think there's enough to be said about like what goes down and how much fun it really is. And
exhausting, right?
It was very exhausting. It was very exhausting. Exhausting in the point of just lack of sleep, because one of the things that we like to do, and it's no secret, is like you go out with friends, you go out with companies you work for, you go out with whatever, but basically you're up late, and then because with my job and what I was doing for PR, I had to work with the Weather Channel, so I was up very early because it is an hour drive. They started at 5, set up at 4, so I was up around 2:30 almost every morning I was there. So lack of sleep, and then drove that massive amount yesterday was kind of tough. But I really, really, I enjoy these events because one of the things that this podcast has allowed me to do, and just because I'm annoying on social media and I talk to so many people as it is, I like to, it was really nice to see a lot of faces. One that I don't get to see very often because they live on the other side of the country, but also two, it was just cool to see a lot of the faces that I talked to, through a webcam, I talked to you through the phone, and actually be able to shake a hand. And I think that's one thing that was really cool too, is post-COVID, being able to shake a hand. I couldn't tell you how many handshakes I had throughout the week, the amount of people I met, people I got to meet in person and get some actually FaceTime with them. It was a really cool event, and I'm excited, Andrew, to try and get you down to the Carolinas next year.
I already told Amanda I'm going.
Yeah.
I figure I'm probably going to work some booth at some point, so we're going.
It'll be a lot of fun. It's my favorite weekend. It's becoming my favorite weekend of the year, so I'm really excited and looking forward to Carolinas next year. But it was cool. I've had a few guys come up to me, obviously, that were fans of the podcast, say hello, chat for a little bit, and that was pretty awesome. So thank you to you guys that actually came out and amongst a sea of legends, notice little old tiny me that doesn't mean much to the industry, and come say hello, wasting a couple minutes of your time to talk to me. That's I thoroughly appreciate it. But we got some cool stuff in the works, Andrew. I think one thing people should be on the lookout for is starting July, we are going to throw down a massive giveaway. More details are to come soon, but it's going to be a big giveaway. A lot of our partners, our show partners, are getting involved, and in a big way. So we really appreciate that, and we're going to obviously give you guys the details as soon as
it is all finalized.
As soon as it's all finalized, we're going to get this thing done here soon. But it's going to be pretty wicked, and you're definitely going to want to get on it. So like we said, go follow Drew and Destin on their socials. If you're not already, go follow us on our socials, whether personal. If not, go follow the Serious Angler podcast page. And we appreciate all of you guys that tuned in tonight, that joined us. And Andrew, is there anything left to let the folks know before we sign off here?
Besides the fact we're fishing a team trail this summer, and as of right now, tomorrow is the last day to sign up for our tournament trail. We have 18 boats already. which is pretty big for the club. And we have 33 boats signed up for this season. So at any given point, we're going to have over 30 boats for a New York just club trail, which is really cool. Yeah.
We probably got like Alabama, Texas guys, Carolina guys that are like 30 boats. That's it, bro. That's it.
Yeah, that's really big for New York. And I think we have just about every hammer from Western New York. So Jeff just signed up.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah,
I'll be talking all the trash.
Yeah, so we'll see Jeff on Saturday. We got a couple guys that when the Bass Nation Weekend Series used to tour through New York, won a lot of money in that in the trail. So it's going to be.
It's not going to be easy.
It's going to be a slugfest. Got to catch them every time, and I think there's like 8 or 9 tournaments. I don't think we're fishing all of them, but there's like 8 or 9 derbies, and they're all going to be
tough.
Fun.
Not easy to win, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And obviously, Andrew and I are going to make tournament videos, so you're going to see Andrew and I bicker about what to do. Hopefully not that much, but more of like catching jaints and being like Andrew and I get like little kids in candy shops when we're on them because we're just giggling the whole time. There's no words.
There's no words. Dead quiet. I was like, got him.
Yeah. But either way, we're looking forward to making those videos for you guys. I have a whole video series, part 1 through 3, that I have to edit. So look out for that in the next coming weeks. I'm going to put a lot of time making those. They're going to be like 30, 40-minute videos. So look out for those. Hopefully you guys will enjoy them. But yeah, just a fair warning. Those are coming out soon, and hopefully you guys will enjoy them and share them with your friends.
Also, I have a rod and reel and bait video coming here in the next day or two of what all of my clients have been using on Lake Erie. So in the past week, I want to say we put over 500 fish in the boat in 7 days of fishing. So it's been insanity.
Thanks, hon.
Yeah, my arms still hurt.
The life of a guide. Yeah, if any of you folks from outside of New York that want to come up and catch some big old smallies, get in touch with this guy. He'll get you on a fat sack of smallies. Big fish is still a 6-pounder, like a 601, right?
Yeah, but so many 5s, so many like upper 5s that have been so close.
So you can be right there and win yourself $100 Tackle Warehouse gift card.
I think somebody, if they book a trip this fall, is going to blow it out of the water. Like,
probably
6'7", 6'8", maybe even a 7-pounder. It's just weather dependent.
Right. But I think that's going to wrap it up. Obviously, folks, we really appreciate you guys tuning in. And if you're not already, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our Facebook page, because we're coming at you with lives and episodes every week with more opportunities to save money on some really top-notch products. And obviously, get a chance to listen to some amazing guys in the industry, guys and gals talk about a whole expansive list of topics and such. So we appreciate you. We'll talk with you soon. We'll see you guys on Friday.